Hello, friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The thermometer on Dusty Morrison's dashboard read 127 degrees Fahrenheit when his air conditioning system died somewhere between Barstow and Needles on Interstate 40. It was July 17, 2023, and what most truckers called the Devil's Highway was living up to its reputation. The Mojave Desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a hostile ocean of sand and scorched earth that could kill a man in hours if he wasn't careful. Dusty had been driving this route for 15 years, hauling everything from electronics to produce across the California desert. At 53 years old, with skin like worn leather and eyes permanently squinted from years of staring into the desert sun, he thought he'd seen everything the Mojave could throw at him. The breakdown of his AC wasn't his first rodeo with equipment failure in extreme heat. But something about this particular afternoon felt different. Wrong, somehow. The load he was hauling didn't help his unease. 28,000 pounds of frozen seafood, packed in refrigerated containers that required constant monitoring. The client, a restaurant chain based in Las Vegas, had been very specific about delivery time and temperature requirements. Any deviation could cost Dusty not just this job, but his reputation in an industry where reliability meant everything. He'd picked up the load in San Diego that morning, and everything had been running smooth until about an hour ago. First, the AC had started blowing warm air. Then it had made a grinding noise that Dusty recognized as a compressor giving up the ghost. Now, with the outside temperature pushing toward 130 degrees, his cab was rapidly becoming an oven. Dusty knew the protocol for this situation. Pull over at the next safe spot, call for roadside assistance, and wait it out. But the next truck stop was 40 miles ahead in Needles, and stopping on the shoulder in this heat with a refrigerated load was asking for trouble. The trailer's cooling unit was working overtime just to maintain temperature, and idling in the direct sun would push it past its limits. He made the decision to push through to Needles. 40 miles. He could handle 40 miles. He'd driven through worse conditions in Iraq during his time in the Army, though that was 25 years and 50 pounds ago. He cranked down both windows, letting the superheated desert air blast through the cab. It was like driving through a furnace, but at least there was air movement. The first sign of trouble came at mile marker 95. Dusty's vision blurred for a moment, just a second or two, but enough to make him grip the steering wheel tighter. He blinked hard, focusing on the shimmering asphalt ahead. Heat mirages danced on the highway, creating the illusion of water that perpetually retreated as he approached. Every trucker knew about highway mirages, but these seemed more vivid than usual, more substantial. That's when he saw the first one. A figure standing on the side of the road, maybe 100 yards ahead. Dusty's first thought was that some poor soul's car had broken down, but as he got closer, he realized the figure wasn't moving. It was just standing there, perfectly still in the crushing heat, wearing what looked like a heavy winter coat. Dusty blinked again, and the figure was gone. Just heat shimmer and empty desert where it had been standing. He shook his head, reached for his water bottle, and took a long drink. The water was warm, almost hot, but he forced himself to drink deeply. Dehydration was the enemy out here, especially when the AC was shot. Mile marker 90. The headache started as a dull throb behind his eyes, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Dusty had experienced heat headaches before, but this one came on fast and hard. He fumbled in his cooler for another water bottle, this one slightly cooler than the last, and downed half of it in one go. That's when he noticed his hands were no longer sweating. In fact, despite the incredible heat, his skin felt dry and papery. bad sign. He'd learned about heat stroke in the Army. When you stop sweating in extreme heat, your body's cooling system has failed. He needed to get to Needles fast. The radio crackled with static, then cleared for a moment. A voice, distorted by interference, seemed to be calling his name. "Dusty! Morrison! Pull over! Dusty!" He grabbed the handset, keying the mic. "This is Dusty Morrison, who's calling. You're breaking up bad, come back." Nothing but static answered him. He tried switching channels, but every frequency was dead air or that strange rhythmic static that sounded almost like breathing. Mile marker 85. The second figure appeared, this one in the middle of the road. Dusty had to swerve to avoid it, his truck lurching dangerously as 48,000 pounds of steel and cargo shifted suddenly. His heart hammered in his chest as he corrected, bringing the rig back under control. In his mirrors, he saw nothing. The road behind him was empty. The rational part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive through 2 tours in Iraq and 15 years of long-haul trucking, knew what was happening. Heat exhaustion, maybe edging into heat stroke. Hallucinations were a symptom. He needed to pull over, needed to call for help, but something kept him driving. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was the thought of losing the load, or maybe it was something else. A strange compulsion that seemed to come from outside himself, pulling him forward down the shimmering highway. That's when he saw Earl's truck. It was his old friend, Earl Hutchinson's rig, no doubt about it. A classic Peterbilt 379, painted that distinctive metallic blue with gold pinstriping that Earl had been so proud of. It was parked on the shoulder about a quarter-mile ahead, hazard lights flashing in the heat haze. Dusty felt relief wash over him. Earl would have water, maybe even a working AC unit. Hell, Earl might even be able to jerry-rig something to get Dusty's air working again. The man was a wizard with mechanical problems. But as Dusty began to slow down, preparing to pull over behind Earl's truck, a memory surfaced through the heat-addled fog of his mind. Earl Hutchinson had died 3 years ago. Heart attack in his sleep at a truck stop in Phoenix. Dusty had been a pallbearer at his funeral. The blue Peterbilt shimmered and disappeared like a popped soap bubble. Dusty's hands were shaking now, and not from the vibration of the truck. He could feel his heart racing, skipping beats. His mouth was so dry his tongue felt like sandpaper. The headache had evolved from a throb to feeling like someone was driving railroad spikes through his temples. Mile marker 80. 5 figures now, standing in a line across the highway. Dusty didn't even try to swerve this time. He drove straight through them, and they dissolved like smoke. In his mirrors, he thought he saw them reform, turning to watch his truck disappear into the heat haze. The engine temperature gauge was climbing now. The strain of pulling the load in this heat without the AC system was taking its toll on the truck's cooling system. If the engine overheated out here, he was done for. The refrigeration unit on the trailer would fail, the seafood would spoil, and Dusty would be stranded in the middle of hell. He reached for the radio again, trying to raise anyone, even just to hear another human voice. "Breaker, breaker. This is westbound trucker at mile 78, looking for a radio check. Come back." The response that came through the speaker made his blood run cold despite the heat. It was his own voice, but distorted, as if played back through water. "There's nobody out here, Dusty. Nobody but us. We've been waiting for you." The rational explanation was simple. Radio skip, atmospheric interference caused by the extreme heat bouncing signals in weird ways. It happened sometimes in the desert, but rational explanations were becoming harder to hold on to as the heat pressed in from all sides. Mile marker 75. The road ahead seemed to stretch and contract like a living thing. The yellow lines zigzagged impossibly, and for a moment Dusty was sure he was driving upside down, the desert sky beneath his wheels and the asphalt above his head. He gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white, forcing himself to focus on the simple act of keeping the truck between the lines. 20 miles to Needles. He could make 20 miles. That's when he saw Wayne's pickup truck. Not a hallucination this time, or at least not like the others. The truck was real, solid, parked at a scenic overlook that Dusty knew well. It was a spot where tourists sometimes stopped to take pictures of the desert, though only an idiot would stop there in heat like this. Wayne McAllister was standing next to the truck, waving frantically. Wayne was real, had to be real. He ran a small trucking company out of Barstow, and Dusty had known him for 10 years. Good man, reliable, not dead like Earl. Dusty slowed down, debating. Every instinct told him to keep driving, to get to Needles and safety. But Wayne was clearly in trouble, and you didn't leave a man stranded in the desert. It was an unwritten rule among truckers, hell, among human beings. He pulled into the scenic overlook, the air brakes hissing as the truck came to a stop. The engine idle sounded rough, uneven. Not a good sign. Wayne jogged over, but something was off about his movement. It was too smooth, too fluid, like he was gliding rather than running. "Dusty! Thank God you stopped!" Wayne called out, but his voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I've been waiting for hours." Dusty looked at Wayne through the windshield, and for a moment Wayne's face seemed to flicker, like a TV with bad reception. For just a second, it wasn't Wayne's face at all, but something else. Something with too many teeth and eyes that reflected the desert sun like mirrors. "My truck broke down," Wayne continued, gesturing to the pickup. "Radiator blew. You got any water to spare?" Dusty's hand moved to the gear shift. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to drive away, but his body wouldn't respond properly. The heat was a physical weight, pressing down on him, making every movement feel like swimming through molasses. "Sure, Wayne," he heard himself say, though the voice didn't sound like his own. "Let me grab you some water." He climbed down from the cab, and the heat hit him like a physical blow. The asphalt was soft under his boots, and he could feel the heat through the thick soles. Wayne stood there, smiling, but the smile was wrong. Too wide. Too many teeth. Dusty walked to the back of his cab where he kept extra water, his movements mechanical, automatic. His vision was tunneling now, darkness creeping in from the edges. Wayne followed, still talking, but the words didn't make sense anymore. They sounded like wind through empty buildings, like whispers from deep underground. As Dusty reached for the water jugs, he happened to glance at Wayne's pickup truck. Really look at it, not just see it. The truck was a rusted hulk, obviously abandoned for years. The tires were flat and cracked, the windows broken. Desert plants grew through holes in the floorboard. He turned back to Wayne, and Wayne wasn't Wayne anymore. The thing standing there wore Wayne's clothes, but the face was melting in the heat, features sliding like wax. The eyes were holes that showed the desert behind it, and when it opened its mouth to speak, sand poured out instead of words. Dusty stumbled backward, his vision swimming. The thing that had been Wayne reached for him with hands that stretched like taffy, fingers extending impossibly long. Dusty tried to run, but his legs wouldn't work right. He fell to his knees on the burning asphalt, the heat searing through his jeans. The world tilted, spun, fragmented into a kaleidoscope of heat and light. He could hear voices now, dozens of them, all calling his name. Some he recognized. Earl, Wayne, other truckers he'd known who'd died over the years. Others were strangers, but they all wanted the same thing. They wanted him to join them, to stop fighting the heat, to let go. "The desert takes its toll," Earl's voice whispered in his ear, though Earl was nowhere to be seen. "We all pay it eventually, Dusty. Today's your day to pay." Dusty crawled toward his truck, the asphalt burning his hands. He had to get back in the cab,
Had to get moving. Needles was only 20 miles away. He could make 20 miles. He'd made it through worse. He'd survived Iraq. He'd survived 40 years of marriage.
He could survive 20 more miles of desert. But as he reached for the door handle of his truck, his hand passed right through it. He looked down at himself and realized he could see through his own flesh, see the desert sand beneath him. He was fading, becoming part of the heat shimmer, part of the mirage.
"No," he croaked through cracked lips. "Not real. Heat stroke. Hallucination." He forced himself to focus, to remember his training. Heat stroke symptoms, confusion, hallucinations, rapid heartbeat, absence of sweating. Treatment. Immediate cooling, hydration, medical attention. He was still rational enough to diagnose himself, which meant he still had a chance. With enormous effort, he solidified his hand enough to grasp the door handle. It was real hot metal under his palm. He hauled himself up and into the cab, slamming the door behind him. The thing that looked like Wayne was pressed against his window now, its melted face leaving streaks on the glass. Dusty threw the truck in gear and floored it, not caring about the rough idle or the climbing temperature gauge. The truck lurched forward, tires screaming on the soft asphalt. In his mirrors, he saw dozens of figures emerging from the desert, all moving toward the scenic overlook he'd just left. They walked with that same gliding motion, and even from a distance, he could see their faces were all wrong. Mile marker 70. The engine coughed, sputtered, but kept running. The temperature gauge was redlined now, and Dusty could smell burning oil. The refrigeration unit on the trailer had gone silent, either failed or automatically shut down to prevent catastrophic damage. 28,000 pounds of seafood was slowly cooking in the desert heat, but Dusty didn't care. Survival was all that mattered now. The highway ahead looked like a river of molten silver. More figures lined both sides of the road, hundreds of them now, all watching his truck pass. Some waved, some stood perfectly still. All of them were wrong, twisted, melted by the desert heat into things that had once been human, but weren't anymore. 15 miles to Needles. The radio crackled to life one more time. This time it was his own voice, clear and undistorted. "Pull over, Dusty. You're going to blow the engine. Pull over and rest." The desert is patient. The desert can wait. He ignored it, keeping his eyes fixed on the road ahead. But the road was changing, twisting into impossible shapes. For a moment he was driving straight up into the sky. Then he was underwater. The desert transformed into an ocean of sand. Reality flickered like a dying light bulb, showing him glimpses of different worlds, different possibilities. In one, he saw himself pulling over, climbing out of the truck, walking into the desert and disappearing. In another, he saw his truck overturned on the highway, his body thrown through the windshield. In a third, he made it to Needles, but when he climbed down from the cab, his skin sloughed off like a snake's, revealing something else underneath. 10 miles to Needles. The engine died. The silence that followed the engine failure was absolute. No engine noise, no AC, not that it had been working, no refrigeration unit humming on the trailer. Just the tick-tick-tick of hot metal cooling and the sound of Dusty's labored breathing in the superheated cab. The truck rolled to a stop on the shoulder, momentum carrying it a few hundred yards before physics won. Dusty sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the dead steering wheel, watching the heat mirages dance on the asphalt ahead. The dashboard thermometer had given up trying to read the outside temperature, displaying only an error message. He knew he should get out, pop the hood, see if there was anything he could do. But getting out meant facing the desert, and the desert was full of things that shouldn't exist. Through his windshield he could see them gathering, keeping their distance for now but clearly interested in his stationary truck. His cell phone showed no signal,
which wasn't unusual for this stretch of highway. The satellite emergency beacon that his company had installed should work, but when he pressed the button, nothing happened. The LED that should have glowed red remained dark. Even the electronics were failing in this heat. Dusty reached for his water bottles, found them all empty. When had he drunk them all? He couldn't remember. Time was playing tricks on him, speeding up and slowing down seemingly at random. According to his watch, it was 3:47 p.m., but the sun seemed to be in the wrong position for that time. Too high, too bright. A knock on his door made him jump. Wayne was back, standing right outside his cab, that too-wide smile still stretching his melting face. Up close, Dusty could see things moving under Wayne's skin, like worms or snakes, creating rippling patterns across his cheeks and forehead. "Engine trouble, Dusty?" Wayne asked, his voice coming from somewhere that wasn't his mouth. "That's a shame. Real shame. Why don't you come out? We can fix it together." "You're not real," Dusty said, his voice barely a croak. "You're just heat stroke. Hallucination." Wayne laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking in reverse. "Oh, Dusty, everything's real in the desert. That's the problem. Too much real all at once. Your brain can't process it all, so it shows you things you can understand. Melting faces, desert ghosts. But we're so much more than that." More figures were approaching now, surrounding the truck. Dusty recognized some of them. Truckers he'd known, workers from truck stops, even what looked like tourists in Hawaiian shirts and sandals. All of them moved wrong, existed wrong, their bodies not quite obeying the laws of physics. Earl's voice came from the radio, even though the radio was off. "Remember that time in Fresno, Dusty, when we drove all night to make that delivery? You said the highway felt alive that night, like it was breathing. You were right. It's always been alive. We just couldn't see it until we paid the toll." Dusty closed his eyes, tried to focus on real memories. His wife, Margaret, back in Bakersfield. Their daughter, Sarah, who was pregnant with their first grandchild. Real people, real lives, waiting for him to come home. He couldn't die out here in the desert. Couldn't become one of these things. But when he opened his eyes, the cab of his truck had changed. The seats were made of sand that constantly shifted and reformed. The steering wheel was a circle of interconnected bones, bleached white by the sun. The dashboard was a collection of rocks and dried plants arranged in a pattern that hurt to look at. "No," he said, shaking his head violently. "No, this isn't real." He blinked hard, and the cab snapped back to normal. Vinyl seats, plastic dashboard, regular steering wheel. But he could feel the other version lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to reassert itself. The heat was unbearable now. His shirt was bone dry despite the temperature, another bad sign. His skin felt tight, like it was shrinking on his bones. When he looked at his hands, they seemed older than before, more wrinkled, with liver spots he didn't remember having. Time was wrong here. He looked at his watch again, 5:23 p.m. But he'd just looked at it, and it had been 3:47, an hour and a half gone in what felt like seconds. Or had it been longer? The sun was lower now, painting the desert in shades of orange and red. Wayne was still at his door, patient as the desert itself. Time doesn't work right when you're between states, Dusty. Between living and joining us. Between real and unreal. You can sit in that cab for hours, days, weeks. Doesn't matter. We'll wait. The desert always wins in the end. Dusty forced himself to think practically. He was maybe 10 miles from Needles. In normal conditions, he could walk it in 3 hours. But these weren't normal conditions, and he wasn't sure he could walk 10 feet, let alone 10 miles. His body felt wrong, disconnected, like it belonged to someone else. He tried the radio one more time, switching to the emergency channel. "Mayday, Mayday, this is trucker Dusty Morrison. Broken down on I-40 westbound near mile marker 60. Need immediate assistance. Suffering from heat exhaustion. Please respond." The voice that answered was his daughter's, which was impossible because Sarah didn't have a CB radio. "Dad, where are you? We've been looking for you for days. Mom's worried sick." "Sarah?" Dusty's voice broke. "Sarah, honey, I'm on I-40, near Needles. Send help." "Dad, you've been missing for 3 days. Your company said you never made the delivery. They found your truck, but you weren't in it. Where are you, Dad?" 3 days? That couldn't be right. He'd left San Diego this morning, hadn't he? Dusty looked at the receipt from his fuel stop in San Diego. The date was wrong, 3 days ago. The timeline in his head scrambled, rearranged, fell apart. Had he been sitting here for 3 days, driving in circles, lost in the desert? "I'm in my truck," he told the radio. But even as he said it, he wasn't sure it was true. Was he in his truck? Or was he standing outside looking in at himself? Or was he somewhere else entirely? And all of this was just his dying brain trying to make sense of its last moments. The figures outside were pressing closer now, their faces against every window. Not just Wayne and Earl now, but dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all with those melting features, those wrong proportions, those eyes that showed too much. One of them, a woman in a sundress that might have been white once but was now the color of dried blood, spoke without moving her lips. "You've been driving the same 10 miles for 3 days, Dusty. Round and round like a record skipping. Your truck ran out of gas 2 days ago, but you kept driving anyway. That's when you started to understand." "Understand what?" Dusty asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "That the desert doesn't just take water from you. It takes everything. Your heat, your moisture, your time, your memories, yourself. It takes and takes until there's nothing left but the shape of what you were, and then it fills that shape with itself. Sand and heat and endless, endless hunger." Dusty looked down at his hands again. They were transparent now, and he could see the truck seat through them, or maybe he was seeing his hands through the seat. Perspective was meaningless here. "I'm dying," he said, and it wasn't a question. "You're transforming," Wayne corrected. "Death is just a doorway in the desert. We all went through it. Earl had his heart attack right here, did you know that? Not in Phoenix. Here, at this exact spot. The desert called him, and he answered. Just like it's calling you." More memories surfaced, but Dusty couldn't tell if they were real or invented. He remembered Earl's funeral, but he also remembered Earl dying on this highway. He remembered making it to Needles, but he also remembered never leaving San Diego. He remembered being 25 and 53 simultaneously. The sun was setting now, or rising, or doing both at once. The desert was all colors and no colors, bright and dark, hot and cold. Dusty's body was all contradictions, heavy and weightless, solid and gaseous, present and absent. He tried to open the truck door, but his hand passed through the handle. Tried again, and this time the handle passed through his hand. On the third try, the door simply ceased to exist, and he fell out onto the desert floor. The sand was cool, which made no sense. It should have been scalding after a day in the sun, but as he looked closer, he realized it wasn't sand at all. It was snow. The desert had become a frozen wasteland, and his truck was buried in a snowdrift. "No," he said, and the snow became sand again. Hot sand that burned his palms as he tried to push himself up. The figures surrounded him now, a circle of impossible beings that had once been human. They didn't attack, didn't threaten. They just watched with those hollow eyes that showed the desert behind them. "The highway takes its toll," they said in unison, their voices creating harmonics that shouldn't exist. "Every mile demands payment. You've driven these roads for 15 years, Dusty Morrison. Did you think you could travel them for free forever? Dusty tried to stand but found he had no legs, looked down and saw his lower body had merged with the sand, becoming part of the desert floor. He could feel every grain, every insect, every underground root system. The desert was vast, and he was becoming part of it. Fight it, he told himself, but his voice was wind through canyons now. This isn't real. Heat stroke, hallucination, fight it. But fighting required energy, and energy required a body, and his body was dispersing into the landscape. He could feel himself spreading out, his consciousness diluting like water poured into an ocean. He was the highway now, could feel every vehicle traveling his asphalt spine. He was the desert, could taste the fear of every lost traveler. Yet somehow, impossibly, he was also still Dusty Morrison, trucker, husband, father. That core of identity refused to dissolve, no matter how thin it was stretched. "Help!" he whispered with a mouth made of sand. "Someone help me." The response to Dusty's plea came from an unexpected source. His CB radio, still somehow functioning in the cab of his truck, despite everything else failing. But it wasn't a voice that answered. It was a song, faint and distorted, playing through the static. An old country tune he recognized from his younger days, something about highways and home. The music seemed to solidify him slightly, pulling his dispersed consciousness back toward a central point. He could feel his body reforming, though it felt different than before. Lighter, less substantial, like he was made of heat shimmer and desert wind. Wayne and Earl and the others backed away slightly, their melted faces showing something that might have been surprise or concern. "You're stronger than most," Wayne said, his voice less certain than before. "Most people just let go, accept what the desert offers, but you're fighting it." "Damn right I'm fighting," Dusty managed to say, his voice still raw but more human than it had been. "I've got a family, a life. I'm not becoming one of you things." Earl laughed, but it was sad rather than mocking. "We all had families, Dusty, lives, dreams. The desert doesn't care about any of that. It takes what it wants." "Then why are you helping it?" Dusty demanded, struggling to his feet. His legs felt like they were made of jelly, but they held his weight. "We're not helping it," the woman in the blood-stained sundress said. "We are it now. When you stay in the desert long enough, when you give it enough of yourself, you become part of its ecosystem, like cacti, like rattlesnakes, like mirages." That word triggered something in Dusty's heat-addled mind. Mirages. Desert mirages were caused by light refraction, layers of air at different temperatures bending light in impossible ways, making you see things that weren't there. Or were they? What if mirages weren't illusions but glimpses of something else, something that existed in those bent light waves? He looked at his truck, still sitting on the shoulder where it had died. The paint was peeling now, rust spreading across its surface like fast-forwarded aging. Through the windshield, he could see himself still sitting in the driver's seat, or a version of himself. That Dusty looked peaceful, eyes closed, hands folded in his lap. Dead or sleeping or something in between. "That's your body," Earl explained, following his gaze. "What's left of it anyway. You've been sitting in that truck for 3 days now, cooking in your own juices, as they say. Your company sent out search parties, but the desert hid you, made your truck invisible to anyone who wasn't ready to see." "Ready to see what?" "The truth. That the desert is alive, that it's hungry, that every person who dies out here feeds it, makes it stronger, more aware." Dusty staggered toward his truck, needing to see his body up close. The figures parted to let him pass, watching with those hollow eyes. As he approached the cab, he could smell something awful, rotting meat in extreme heat.
The seafood in his trailer, of course, but also something else. Something closer. He climbed up to look through the driver's side window, and yes, there he was. Sitting in the seat, head tilted back, mouth open. His skin was darkened, blistered from the heat. His eyes were gone, dried out or taken by desert scavengers. But somehow, impossibly, the body's chest was still rising and falling slightly. "Still alive," Wayne said from behind him. "Technically. The desert keeps them alive as long as possible. Feeds on their dreams, their memories, their essence. When there's nothing left to take, then it lets them die. But by then, they're already part of it." Dusty pressed his hand against the window, and for a moment he could feel both sides. The heat of the glass against his palm and the cool of his ghostly hand against his living face. Two states of being, overlapping, contradicting. "I can get back in," he said. "I can return to my body." "You can try," Earl said. "Some do, but you won't be the same. The desert will be inside you forever. You'll drive these highways and you'll see us. You'll hear us. You'll know what's waiting for every traveler who breaks down in the heat. That knowledge will eat at you, day by day, until you come back. They always come back." Dusty reached for the door handle, but before he could grab it, the air horn of an approaching truck split the air. A big rig approaching fast from the east. As it got closer, Dusty could see it was a fellow trucker, someone who might help. But the truck passed right by without slowing. The driver looked directly at Dusty's broken-down rig, but showed no signs of seeing it, just as Earl had said, invisible to those who weren't ready to see. "Wait!" Dusty ran after the truck, waving his arms. "Stop, please!" The truck continued on, disappearing into the heat haze. But as Dusty watched it go, he noticed something. The desert figures couldn't follow it. They stopped at some invisible boundary, watching the truck escape with what looked like hunger or envy. "Why couldn't you follow that truck?" Dusty asked. Wayne's melted features twisted into something that might have been a frown. "Moving vehicles are protected. The highway spirits, older than us, have rules. As long as the wheels turn and the engine runs, the desert can't fully claim them. But when they stop, you can take them." Dusty understood now. "That's why you wanted me to pull over. Why the mirages always try to make people stop." "The desert is patient," the woman in the sundress said. "Everyone stops eventually." But Dusty was thinking now, his mind clearer than it had been in hours or days. The music from his CB radio was still playing, faint but persistent. Music meant signal. Signal meant connection to the outside world. He moved back to his truck, studied it carefully. The engine was dead, that was certain, but the battery might still have some charge. The electrical system might still work. If he could get the truck moving, even just rolling, would that be enough to break the desert's hold? The truck was parked on a slight incline. Not much, but maybe enough. "It won't work," Earl said, reading his thoughts. "We've seen others try. The desert doesn't let go that easily." But Dusty was already climbing into the cab, passing through the door like it was made of mist. Inside, his body sat rotting in the heat, but he ignored it, focusing on the controls. The key was still in the ignition. He turned it, and amazingly, the dashboard lights flickered on. Weak, but there. He released the parking brake. Nothing happened for a moment. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the truck began to roll. Just an inch, then a foot, then faster. The desert figures screamed. It wasn't a human scream, but the sound of wind through canyons, of sand grinding against stone, of heat itself given voice. They rushed toward the truck, but as soon as the wheels started turning, they hit that invisible barrier and bounced back. The truck was picking up speed now, rolling down the slight grade. Not fast, maybe 5 miles per hour, but movement nonetheless. Dusty could feel something changing, a pull like gravity drawing him back toward his body. No! Wayne reached through the barrier, his arms stretching impossibly long, fingers becoming tendrils of heat that wrapped around the truck's bumper. You can't leave! No one leaves! But others were fighting back now. Dusty heard them. Real voices on the CB radio, truckers for miles around all talking at once. Got a breakdown at mile marker 60 westbound. I see it now. How did I miss it before? Jesus Christ, he's been out there for 3 days? Get emergency services now. The veil was breaking, the desert's illusion crumbling. As the truck rolled, Dusty felt himself being pulled back into his body, but it was agony. Every nerve ending was on fire, every cell screaming as it was forced back to life. He could taste the death in his mouth, feel the sunburn like acid on his skin, experience every moment of the 3 days he'd been sitting in the heat. But he was alive. Damaged, possibly dying, but alive. The truck rolled to a stop after about 100 yards, but it was enough. The spell was broken. He could hear sirens in the distance, see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles approaching. The desert figures were fading, becoming translucent, returning to mere heat mirages. Wayne stood at the boundary, no longer melting but somehow sadder for being more human. You'll be back, Dusty. The desert marked you now. You'll dream of us. You'll see us in every heat shimmer. And one day, when you're old or sick or just tired, you'll come back. They always do. The paramedics who pulled Dusty from his truck would later describe it as one of the worst cases of heat stroke they'd ever seen, where the victim survived. His core body temperature was 108 degrees Fahrenheit, well into the range typically considered fatal. He'd lost 30 pounds of water weight in 3 days. His kidneys had shut down, his liver was failing, and he'd suffered multiple minor strokes. But he was alive. The first thing Dusty remembered from the hospital was the cold. Blessed, beautiful cold. Ice packs everywhere, cooling blankets, IV fluids so chilled they made his veins ache. After the inferno of the desert, it felt like heaven. Margaret was there, had been there for 2 days, they told him. She held his hand while he drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering prayers and promises and occasionally cursing him for scaring her so badly. Don't you ever do that again, she said when he finally opened his eyes and kept them open. 3 days, Dusty. 3 days you were missing. They found your truck by accident. Some rookie cop saw vultures circling and decided to check it out. Dusty tried to speak, but his throat was too damaged. The doctors said it would take weeks to fully recover his voice. The heat had literally cooked his vocal cords. But he could write, and the first thing he wrote was, "The desert is alive." Margaret thought he was still delirious, and maybe he was. The doctors certainly thought so when he kept writing about Wayne and Earl and the melting faces. They increased his psychiatric medications, assuming he was suffering from heat-induced psychosis. But the blood tests told a different story, along with the expected markers of severe dehydration and heat stroke. They found something else. Unusual mineral deposits in his blood, crystalline structures that didn't match any known biological process. The doctors had no explanation, eventually dismissing it as contamination from the desert environment. Dusty knew better. As he recovered over the following weeks, he began researching. Hospital Wi-Fi and a borrowed laptop revealed dozens of similar cases over the years. Truckers found after days in the desert, all with the same story of hallucinations, all with the same mysterious mineral deposits in their blood. Most were dismissed as heat stroke victims, but a few, like Dusty, insisted their experiences were real. He found a forum, hidden in the deep corners of the internet, where survivors gathered to share their stories. They called themselves the Marked Ones. Each had survived an encounter with what they called the desert consciousness, and each bore the consequences,
The consequences were significant. Dusty discovered them slowly as he recovered. He could no longer tolerate heat above 80 degrees without becoming violently ill. His dreams were plagued by visions of the desert, of Wayne and Earl and the others still trapped there, and worst of all, he could see things others couldn't. Heat mirages showed him glimpses of that other world. On hot days, he'd see the figures standing by the roadside, watching. In the shimmer of heat rising from hot asphalt, he'd see faces. They never threatened him directly, but they were always there, waiting. The company insurance covered his medical bills but terminated his employment. 3 days of missed delivery, total loss of cargo, and significant truck damage made him uninsurable. His CDL was suspended pending a full medical review. His career as a trucker was effectively over. But maybe that was for the best. Sarah came to visit with her husband, her pregnant belly showing now. 6 months, along with Dusty's first grandchild. As she sat beside his hospital bed, Dusty found himself staring at her, memorizing every detail. He'd come so close to never seeing her again, to becoming one of those things in the desert. "Dad, you're freaking me out with the staring," Sarah said, but she was smiling. He wrote on his notepad, "Just happy to see you." "Mom says you've been having nightmares. About the desert?" He nodded. "The doctors say it's normal. Trauma response. It'll fade with time." He wanted to tell her it would never fade, that the desert had marked him, claimed a piece of him. But instead, he just squeezed her hand and nodded again. The physical therapy was grueling. His muscles had atrophied significantly during his ordeal, and the heat damage to his organs meant he tired easily. But Dusty pushed through it with the same determination that had kept him alive in the desert. Every step, every exercise was a defiance of what had tried to claim him. 3 months after the incident, he was finally released from the hospital. Margaret drove him home to Bakersfield, taking the long way to avoid Interstate 40. She didn't say why, but Dusty knew she'd researched his route, knew where he'd broken down. She was protecting him from having to see that stretch of highway again. Their house felt foreign after so long away. Everything was the same, but Dusty was different. He found himself checking the temperature constantly, keeping the air conditioning at 68 degrees, even though Margaret complained about the electric bill. He couldn't explain that anything warmer made him feel like he was back in that truck, cooking in his own skin. The first dust devil he saw sent him into a panic attack. It formed in their backyard on a windy afternoon, just a small whirlwind of dust and leaves. But Dusty saw faces in it, heard whispers in its rotation. He locked himself in the bathroom until it passed, Margaret knocking worriedly on the door. "It's just wind, honey," she said. "Just wind." But Dusty knew better. The desert had followed him home. He started therapy, both physical and psychological. The physical therapy helped rebuild his strength. The psychological therapy was less successful. How could he explain to a therapist what had really happened without sounding insane? So he played along, agreed it was all hallucinations, took the prescribed medications. The medications helped with the anxiety, but did nothing for the visions. If anything, they made them worse. The boundaries between real and unreal became blurrier. Sometimes he'd see Wayne standing in his backyard, melted face pressed against the window. Sometimes Earl would be sitting in his living room, watching TV like nothing had happened. "You can't escape us, Dusty," Earl would say conversationally. "We're part of you now. That mineral in your blood, that's desert. Pure crystallized desert. You're carrying us with you wherever you go." 6 months after the incident, Dusty received a package with no return address. Inside was a CB radio, old and dusty, with a note. "For when you're ready to come back, the desert is patient. W." He threw it in the trash. Margaret found it the next morning, sitting on his nightstand. "Did you change your mind about throwing this away?" she asked. He hadn't, but there it was. He locked it in the garage, in an old filing cabinet he hadn't opened in years. But at night, he could hear it crackling with static, voices calling through the interference. Sometimes his own voice, sometimes others. All calling him back to the desert. The forum helped. Other marked ones shared their coping strategies. Stay hydrated, always. Avoid extreme heat. Don't drive through deserts alone. Some had moved to colder climates. Alaska, Canada, Norway. Anywhere far from the desert's reach. But others had given in, returned to the desert, and were never seen again. Their final posts were always the same. "It's calling me home." Dusty swore he'd never be one of them. A year passed. Sarah had her baby, a beautiful girl named Emma. Dusty held his granddaughter and felt something he hadn't felt since the desert. Hope. Life continuing, moving forward, despite everything. He found work as a dispatcher for a local delivery company. It didn't pay as well as long-haul trucking, but it kept him connected to the industry he loved. He could help other drivers, guide them safely to their destinations, without having to face the open road himself. But late at night, when the temperature dropped and the world was quiet, he'd sometimes walk outside and look east, toward the desert. He could feel it out there, vast and patient, waiting. The figures were there too, just beyond the range of normal vision, standing in the heat mirages that formed even in the cool night air. "You'll be back," Wayne whispered on the wind. "They always come back." Dusty would go inside, lock the door, turn up the air conditioning, but he knew Wayne was right. The desert had claimed a part of him, and eventually it would call that part home. Maybe not today, maybe not for years, but someday. The CB radio in the garage continued its nightly broadcasts. Sometimes Dusty would stand outside the locked cabinet, listening to the voices of the lost calling through the static. He recognized some of them now, truckers who'd gone missing over the years, their names appearing on the forum as new members who posted once about their experience, and then never again. One night, 2 years after his ordeal, the radio broadcast something different. Not voices, but coordinates, latitude and longitude, repeated over and over. Dusty wrote them down before he could stop himself. The location was in the Mojave, not far from where he'd broken down. He looked up the spot on Google Earth. There was nothing there, just empty desert. But when he zoomed in, he could see tracks. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all leading to the same spot and then just ending. He knew he should ignore it. Throw away the coordinates, forget about the radio, focus on his new life. But the curiosity gnawed at him. What was out there? What were all those drivers finding? Margaret noticed his distraction. "You're thinking about it again, aren't you? The desert?" He couldn't lie to her. Never could. It left something unfinished. "I can feel it." "Dusty, no. You nearly died. You can't go back out there." "I know," he said. But they both heard the uncertainty in his voice. The dreams got worse. Every night now, he was back in the truck. But this time, he could see what really happened. The desert hadn't just tried to take him. It had been trying to show him something important. Something that explained why it collected souls, why it needed the essence of travelers. In the dreams, Wayne and Earl weren't monsters. They were guardians, protecting something ancient and vital. The desert itself was alive, yes, but it was also dying. Climate change, urban expansion, human interference, all slowly killing the desert consciousness. It needed human essence to survive, to maintain the barrier between worlds. "Without us," Dream Earl explained, "something worse gets through. Something that makes us look like salvation." Dusty woke from these dreams drenched in cold sweat, the taste of sand in his mouth. 3 years after his ordeal, on a day when the temperature hit 115 degrees in Bakersfield, Dusty made a decision. He told Margaret he was going to a doctor's appointment. Instead, he drove east. Not in a truck this time. He'd bought an old sedan, reliable with excellent air conditioning. The drive to the coordinates took 4 hours. He parked at the side of the highway, the same highway where he'd nearly died, and walked into the desert. They were waiting for him. Not just Wayne and Earl, but dozens of them. All the marked ones who'd returned. They looked more solid than before, more real, less melted, more preserved. "Welcome back, Dusty," Wayne said, and his face was almost normal. "We knew you'd come." "I need to understand," Dusty said. "What are you? What is this really about?" Earl gestured to the desert around them. "We're antibodies, Dusty. The desert's immune system. Every ecosystem has one. Forests have their spirits. Oceans have theirs. We're what the desert created to protect itself." "Protect itself from what?" "From nothing," the woman in the sundress said. Her dress was white again, clean. "From the void that comes when an ecosystem truly dies. When the consciousness that maintains the balance is gone. You've felt it, haven't you? The wrongness in the world? The sense that something fundamental is breaking?" Dusty had felt it. Everyone had. The world felt increasingly unstable, unreal, like reality itself was developing cracks. "The desert needs us," Wayne continued. "Our memories, our experiences, our consciousness. It feeds on them, yes, but it also preserves them. Every trucker who joins us becomes part of the eternal record. The desert remembers every journey, every mile, every story. And if I don't join you? Then you live with the knowledge. You see us everywhere. You dream of us. And eventually, the weight of that knowledge breaks you. Better to choose it than to have it chosen for you." Dusty stood there, at the crossroads between worlds, feeling the pull of the desert and the pull of home in equal measure. Margaret was waiting. Sarah and little Emma needed him. But the desert needed him too, in its strange, terrible way. "Not today," he said finally. "Maybe someday, but not today." Wayne smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuine. "The desert is patient. We'll be here when you're ready." Dusty walked back to his car, started the engine, and drove home. The figures watched him go, then faded back into heat mirages. But he knew they were still there, would always be there, waiting. He made it home before Margaret returned from her errands, put the car keys back on their hook, took a long, cold shower. When she asked about his doctor's appointment, he said it went fine. That night, he held her close, feeling her warmth, her realness, her humanity. Outside, the desert waited, vast and patient and hungry. But inside, in the artificial cold of their climate-controlled home, Dusty Morrison was still human, still himself, still fighting. The CB radio in the garage continued its broadcasts. Sometimes he listened, sometimes he didn't. The coordinates came through regularly now, always the same location, always calling. Other marked ones posted on the forum about receiving the same coordinates. Some went to investigate. They never posted again. Dusty knew that one day he'd return to those coordinates. When he was older, when Margaret was gone, when Sarah didn't need him anymore. When the weight of carrying the desert inside him became too much to bear. He'd drive out to that spot where the tracks ended and finally understand what the desert had been trying to show him all along. But not today. Today he was still Dusty Morrison, survivor, grandfather, human being. The desert could wait. It was good at waiting. In the meantime, he lived. He worked. He loved his family. He avoided the heat and ignored the mirages and pretended the voices on the radio were just interference. It was a kind of life, perhaps not the one he'd planned, but life nonetheless. And late at night, when the desert called strongest, he'd remember that moment in the truck when he'd chosen to fight, chosen to roll forward instead of stopping. That small act of defiance that had saved him. He'd remember that he was stronger than the desert thought, more stubborn than the heat that had tried to claim him. "I survived," he'd whisper to the darkness. "I survived." And somewhere in the Mojave, Wayne and Earl and all the others would whisper back, "For now." The desert, after all, was patient. October 15th, 2023. The morning news had been nothing but wildfire coverage for 3 straight days. The mountain fire had already consumed 47,000 acres of Northern California wilderness, and the smoke plume was visible from space. But Brock Henderson had a delivery to make, and in 22 years of professional trucking, he'd never missed a deadline because of weather. Brock was 57 years old, built like a linebacker gone slightly soft, with thick forearms covered in old tattoos from his Navy days. He'd driven through blizzards in Wyoming, tornadoes in Oklahoma, and hurricanes in Florida. A little smoke wasn't going to stop him from delivering 32,000 pounds of medical supplies from Sacramento to Eureka. The loading had gone smooth at the warehouse. Dale, the dock supervisor Brock had known for almost a decade, had seemed worried as they secured the final pallets. "You sure about this run, Brock?" Dale had asked, squinting at the orange-tinted sky. Even here in Sacramento, 70 miles from the fire line, the air quality was listed as very unhealthy on every weather app. "Highway 299's right in the path of that smoke plume." "Company says it's critical," Brock had replied, checking the tie-down straps one more time. "Hospitals in Eureka are running low on supplies because everybody's been rerouting south." Dale had handed him a box of N95 masks. "Take these. That old truck of yours ain't exactly airtight." Brock had laughed it off at the time, but now, heading northeast on Interstate 5 toward the Highway 299 turnoff, he was grateful for Dale's foresight. The smoke was getting thicker with every mile. What had started as a brown haze on the horizon had become a wall of gray-orange fog that reduced visibility to maybe a quarter mile. His 2006 Kenworth W900 was a beast of a machine, reliable as sunrise, but Dale was right about it not being airtight. Brock could already smell the smoke seeping in through the door seals and ventilation system. It had a distinct odor, not just wood smoke, but something chemical, synthetic. All the houses and cars and human things that got caught in the fire's path, returning to the atmosphere as toxic vapor. He put on one of the N95 masks, adjusting it to sit properly over his nose and mouth. It helped, but not much. The smoke seemed to find every gap, every imperfect seal. His eyes were already starting to water. The CB radio crackled with trucker chatter, voices distorted by static that seemed worse than usual. "Eastbound on 299, this is Frank in the Yellow Pete," came a voice through the interference. "Visibility's down to nothing past Weaverville, like driving through chocolate pudding out here." Another voice responded, "That's a big 10-4, Frank. I'm westbound at mile marker 42, and I can't see more than 2 truck lengths ahead, thinking about pulling off at the next wide spot." Brock keyed his mic. "This is Brock in the Burgundy Kenworth, just turning onto 299 from I-5. How's the road surface? Any accidents or delays?" Frank's voice came back, but it was different now, strained. "Road's clear far as I can tell, but something ain't right out here. Saw a car on the shoulder about 10 miles back, doors open, nobody around. And there's debris in the road. Can't tell what it is through the smoke." The Highway 299 turnoff came up faster than expected, the smoke playing tricks with distance perception. Brock downshifted smoothly, feeling the weight of his load shift as he took the curving ramp. This was the part of trucking he'd always loved, the precision of handling a big rig, the dance between man and machine. But today, that dance felt off. The controls were sluggish, like the smoke was somehow adding resistance to everything. As he merged onto 299 heading west, the world outside his windshield transformed into an alien landscape. The smoke was so thick now that the sun, which should have been climbing toward noon position, was just a dim orange disk that could have been anywhere in the sky. The forest on either side of the highway was invisible, hidden behind curtains of gray and brown that swirled and shifted in patterns that didn't match the wind. Brock's speedometer read 45 miles per hour, but it felt like he was standing still. The white lines on the road appeared and disappeared in the murk, and more than once he found himself drifting toward the shoulder before correcting. His usual reference points, mile markers, exit signs, familiar landmarks, were all invisible. The radio crackled again. Frank's voice, but now it sounded like he was talking from the bottom of a well. "Can anyone hear me? I'm stopped. Something in the road. It's moving, but I can't." Static swallowed the rest. Brock tried to respond, but his own voice sounded strange in his ears, muffled and distant despite the mask. "Frank, this is Brock. What's your 20, Frank?" No response. No, just that rhythmic static that sounded almost like breathing. Deep, labored breathing. 10 miles in, Brock encountered his first abandoned vehicle. A blue sedan sat perfectly centered in the right lane, like someone had simply stopped driving and gotten out. The doors were closed, hazard lights still blinking weakly through the smoke. Brock slowed to a crawl, easing around it in the left lane. As he passed, he glanced through the sedan's windows. The keys were still in the ignition, the engine still running. His chest was starting to feel tight. Not pain exactly, but pressure, like someone was sitting on his rib cage. The N95 mask, which had felt restrictive before, now seemed completely inadequate. Every breath was work, and what air he did get tasted of ash and chemicals and something else. Something organic and wrong. Mile marker 25, or what he thought was mile marker 25. The signs were unreadable through the smoke. Another abandoned vehicle, this time a pickup truck, jackknifed across both lanes. Brock had to use the shoulder to get around it, feeling his trailer tires grab at the loose gravel. The pickup's driver door hung open, and there were drag marks in the ash that had settled on the asphalt. Like someone had pulled something heavy away from the vehicle. The pressure in his chest was getting worse. Brock reached for his water bottle, pulled down the mask for a moment to take a drink, and immediately regretted it. The unfiltered smoke hit his lungs like ground glass, triggering a coughing fit that brought tears to his eyes and made him swerve dangerously close to the guardrail. When the coughing finally stopped, he noticed his vision was starting to tunnel. The edges of his sight were going dark, leaving only a shrinking circle of murky orange light straight ahead. Carbon monoxide poisoning. He'd read about it in safety briefings. Wildfire smoke was full of CO, and his old truck's cabin wasn't sealed enough to keep it out. He needed to stop, needed to get out and get fresh air. But there was no fresh air out there, just more smoke, thicker smoke, and those drag marks by the abandoned pickup. The radio burst to life with a scream. It was quick, cut off almost immediately, but unmistakably human. Male, terrified, in pain. Then Frank's voice, but wrong, like a recording played at the wrong speed. "Don't stop. Whatever you see, don't stop. They're using the smoke. They're in the smoke." Brock's hands were shaking now. The tremor started in his fingers and worked its way up his arms. Another symptom of CO poisoning, or just fear. He couldn't tell anymore. His thoughts were becoming fragmented, disconnected. He'd been driving for... how long? He looked at his dash clock, but the numbers didn't make sense. Had he been on 299 for 20 minutes or 2 hours? A figure appeared in the road ahead. Through the smoke, it was just a dark shape at first, human-sized, standing in the middle of the westbound lane. Brock slowed, squinting through the windshield. As he got closer, details emerged from the murk. A man in what looked like firefighter gear, waving his arms. Brock's first instinct was relief. Firefighters meant help, meant rescue, meant someone who knew what was going on. But as he got closer, something seemed off about the figure's movements. They were too fluid, too smooth, like the smoke itself had taken human form. He slowed to maybe 10 miles per hour, peering through the windshield. The firefighter's face shield was up, revealing features that were wrong. The proportions were off. Eyes too far apart, mouth too wide, skin that seemed to ripple and shift like it was made of smoke itself. The figure smiled, and Brock saw that its teeth were black, charred like burnt wood. He floored the accelerator, and the thing in firefighter gear dove aside at the last second. In his mirrors, Brock saw it stand up, unhurt, still smiling with those burnt teeth. Then the smoke swallowed it. His breathing was getting harder. Each inhalation was a conscious effort, and what air he got didn't seem to be enough. His fingernails were turning blue. He noticed when he reached to adjust the mirror. Cyanosis. Not enough oxygen in his blood. The road ahead was disintegrating into chaos. More abandoned vehicles. Some crashed into each other. Some simply stopped. Personal belongings scattered on the asphalt. Suitcases, boxes, children's toys. Like people had tried to flee on foot and dropped everything. And there were more figures in the smoke now. Dozens of them, all wearing uniforms. Firefighter gear, police uniforms, paramedic outfits. All moving wrong, all with those same impossible faces. They watched his truck pass with black eyes that reflected no light. Mile marker 30, maybe, or 35. The markers were meaningless now. Distance had become fluid, unreliable. Brock felt like he'd been driving forever, but also like he'd just started. Time was breaking down along with everything else. The radio crackled. "Brock, this is Dale." But Dale was in Sacramento, 70 miles away. There was no way his radio would reach that far, not on CB frequencies. "Brock, you need to turn around. The delivery, it's not real. There's no hospital order. We checked. Something, wanted trucks on this road. Wanted people in the smoke." Brock tried to respond, but when he keyed the mic, no words came out. His throat was closing, swelling from the smoke exposure. He could taste blood. A massive shape loomed out of the smoke ahead. Another truck, but this one was moving, weaving between the abandoned vehicles at impossible speed. As it passed, Brock saw the driver clearly through the side window. It was Frank, or what was left of him. His face was partially melted, like wax exposed to heat. One eye was gone, the socket filled with what looked like ash. But he was smiling, that same terrible smile with blackened teeth. He waved as he passed, and Brock saw that his hand was fused to the steering wheel, flesh and plastic melted together. The CB exploded with voices. Dozens of them, all truckers Brock knew or had known. Some were drivers he'd heard had died in previous fires. All talking at once, overlapping, creating a cacophony that sounded like wind through a burning forest. "Join us, Brock. The smoke takes everyone eventually. Stop fighting. It's easier if you stop fighting. We're all here. Everyone who drove through the smoke. The fire needs us, needs our engines, our movement. We keep driving forever now. Through the smoke, in the smoke, as the smoke." Brock's vision was failing. The tunnel was closing, leaving only a pinprick of orange light. His hands were numb on the steering wheel. He couldn't feel his feet on the pedals. The truck was driving itself now, following the road through some kind of muscle memory. That's when he saw the fire line. Through the smoke, maybe a mile ahead, the actual wildfire. a wall of flame that stretched across the entire horizon, consuming everything in its path. The road led straight into it, and there were trucks driving into the flames. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Big rigs, pickup trucks, cars, all maintaining perfect speed as they entered the inferno. None of them burned. They just passed through like the fire was a doorway, disappearing into the light. Brock tried to brake, but his feet wouldn't respond. Tried to turn the wheel, but his hands were locked in place. The truck maintained its speed, following the vehicle ahead of it toward the flames. The voices on the radio had merged into a single sound now, a roar that might have been static, or might have been the voice of the fire itself. It spoke in languages that predated words, communicating directly with some primitive part of Brock's brain that understood fire as humanity's oldest friend and oldest enemy. He was going to drive into the fire. He understood that now. They all did eventually. That's what the smoke was for. To prepare them, to change them, to make them compatible with what waited in the flames. The abandoned vehicles were from those who'd tried to resist, who'd gotten out and run. But you couldn't run from smoke. It found you, filled you, transformed you. 300 yards from the fire line. The heat was incredible, even through the truck's insulation. The windshield was starting to crack from thermal stress. 200 yards. Brock could see through the flames now, see what was on the other side. It wasn't death. It was something else. A road that existed between states, between real and unreal, between smoke and fire and flesh. 100 yards. His thoughts were fragmenting, becoming smoke themselves. 50 yards. That's when Brock's survival instinct, honed by 22 years on the road and 4 years in the Navy before that, finally broke through the carbon monoxide poisoning and the hypoxia and the hallucinations. With strength he didn't know he still had, he yanked the steering wheel hard to the right. The Kenworth's tires screamed as 48,000 pounds of truck and trailer fought against physics. The trailer started to jackknife, its momentum wanting to continue straight while the cab turned right. Brock felt the vehicle lifting, the left side wheels coming off the ground. For a moment that stretched like taffy, he was balanced on the edge of rolling over. Then the wheels slammed back down, and the truck plowed through the guardrail like it was made of aluminum foil. The world turned into a chaos of breaking glass and shrieking metal as the rig plunged down the embankment beside the highway. Trees appeared out of the smoke like giants, and Brock could only watch as his truck clipped one, spun, hit another. The trailer broke free, disappearing into the gray void. The cab rolled once, twice, then came to rest against a massive pine tree, the engine still somehow running. Brock hung sideways in his seat, held in place by the seatbelt. Blood was running from a gash on his forehead, following gravity to drip on the passenger window below him. His mask was gone, lost in the crash, and he was breathing raw smoke again. But he was away from the fire line, away from that impossible wall of flames that trucks drove into without burning. The engine coughed, sputtered, died. In the sudden silence, Brock could hear the fire roaring somewhere above him, beyond the embankment. It sounded angry, cheated of its prize. He had to move. The smoke was just as thick down here, maybe thicker, and if the fire jumped the highway, this whole hillside would go up in minutes. Brock released his seatbelt and fell awkwardly onto the passenger door, which was now the floor. His ribs screamed in protest. Definitely cracked, maybe broken. Every breath was agony, but he forced himself to keep breathing. Shallow, rapid breaths that didn't bring in too much smoke at once. The driver's door above him was jammed, crushed by the roll, but the windshield was gone, blown out in the crash. Brock pulled himself up and through the opening, feeling glass fragments tear at his clothes and skin. He didn't care. He had to get away from the truck before the fire found it. Outside, the world was an alien landscape. The smoke was so thick he couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. Trees loomed out of the gray like ghosts, their shapes distorted and threatening. The ground was covered in ash that had fallen like snow, muffling his footsteps. Which way was away from the fire? He couldn't tell. The roaring seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. His sense of direction, usually reliable, was completely scrambled. Then he heard it. Water. Somewhere to his left, the sound of running water. A creek or river. Water meant safety from the fire, at least temporarily. Brock stumbled toward the sound, using trees for support. His vision was still tunneling, and every few steps he had to stop and cough, bringing up black phlegm that looked like tar. The smoke was inside him now, coating his lungs, his throat, his sinuses. He could feel it changing him with every breath. The creek appeared suddenly, a black ribbon cutting through the gray world. It wasn't much, maybe 10 feet wide and a couple feet deep, but it was water. Brock fell to his knees at the bank and plunged his head under the surface. The shock of cold water was like being reborn. He came up gasping, then went under again, trying to wash the smoke from his eyes, his nose, his mouth. When he finally stopped, he was shivering uncontrollably, but his head was clearer than it had been in hours? Days? He'd lost all sense of time. That's when he noticed the other person. On the opposite bank, barely visible through the smoke, someone was sitting against a tree, watching him. "Hello?" Brock called out, his voice raw and barely audible. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The figure didn't move, didn't respond. As Brock's eyes adjusted, he could make out more details. It was a man in a CAL FIRE uniform, the yellow Nomex shirt and green pants unmistakable even through the smoke. But something was wrong with how he was sitting. Too still. Too rigid. Brock waded across the creek, the cold water shocking against his injuries. As he got closer, he understood why the firefighter wasn't moving. The man was dead. Had been for a while from the look of it. The body was positioned against the tree, but it wasn't decay that had killed him. He was changed. His skin had a gray, ash-like quality, as if he'd been cremated and reconstituted. His eyes were open but filled with ash instead of fluid. When Brock got close enough, he could see that the man's lungs, visible through his open mouth, were packed solid with what looked like compressed smoke. There was a name tag on the uniform. D. Patterson. Dale. Not the Dale from Sacramento, but another Dale. How many Dales were there? How many had the smoke taken? A twig snapped behind him. Brock spun around to find 3 more figures emerging from the smoke, all in firefighter gear, all moving with that same unnatural fluidity he'd seen on the highway. Their faces were hidden by smoke masks and helmets, but he could see their eyes through the face shields, black, reflective, like pools of oil. "You survived the crash," one of them said, its voice like wind through a chimney. "That's unusual. Most accept their fate at the fire line." "Stay back," Brock warned, though he had nothing to defend himself with. "We're here to help," another said, taking a step closer. "You're suffering from severe smoke inhalation. You need medical attention." For a moment, Brock almost believed them. They looked like firefighters. They sounded concerned, professional. But then he noticed their boots weren't touching the ground. They were floating, just slightly, their forms wavering like heat mirages. "You're not real," he said, backing toward the creek. "Real is subjective in the smoke," the first one replied. "We're as real as your dying brain allows us to be. And you are dying, Brock. Every breath brings you closer. Why fight it?" They were right about one thing. He was dying. He could feel it in the way his heart was skipping beats, the way his vision kept fading in and out. The smoke had done too much damage. Even if he got to clean air right now, which didn't exist for miles, he'd probably still die. But he'd be damned if he'd just give up. Brock turned and ran downstream, following the creek. The figures didn't pursue immediately, but he could hear them laughing. That awful sound like fire consuming dry wood. The creek curved, and suddenly Brock found himself in a small clearing where the smoke was thinner. Not clear, but thin enough that he could see maybe 30 feet. In the center of the clearing was a Forest Service fire station. Just a small outpost, the kind they positioned throughout the wilderness during fire season. Hope flared in his chest. There would be oxygen tanks, medical supplies, maybe even a radio that could reach beyond the smoke's interference. He stumbled to the door, found it unlocked. Inside, the station was dark, lit only by the orange glow filtering through the windows. But it was intact, untouched by fire. Oxygen tanks lined one wall. Medical supplies filled a cabinet. A radio sat on a desk, its power light glowing green. Brock grabbed an oxygen tank, fumbled with the regulator, and pressed the mask to his face. Pure, clean oxygen flooded his lungs. The relief was so intense he nearly passed out. He sat on the floor, breathing deeply, feeling his head clear with each breath. After a few minutes, he tried the radio. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Brock Henderson. I'm at a Forest Service station somewhere off Highway 299. Truck crashed, suffering from smoke inhalation. Please respond." Static. Then, a voice he recognized. Frank. "Brock? Holy shit, you're alive? I thought the fire got you for sure. Frank? Where are you? I saw you on the highway, but you were different." "Different? What are you talking about? I've been holed up at the Weaverville truck stop for the last 6 hours. Road's been closed since noon. Where the hell have you been?" Brock looked at his watch. It read 2:17 p.m., but that was impossible. He'd been driving for hours, hadn't he? "Frank, what time is it?" "Just past 2 in the afternoon. Why?" 2 hours. He'd only been on the road for 2 hours. Everything else, the eternal drive, the fire line, the trucks driving into flames, had happened in just 2 hours. "Frank, listen to me. Don't try to drive through the smoke. There's something in it, something that affects your mind, makes you see things, makes you want to drive into the fire." "Jesus, Brock, you sound rough. How much smoke did you inhale?" Before Brock could answer, the door to the station opened. The 3 figures in firefighter gear stood silhouetted against the orange light outside. "He's hallucinating," one of them said, but not to Brock, to the radio, to Frank. "Severe carbon monoxide poisoning. We're going to get him to medical." "Thank God." Frank's voice crackled. "Take care of him, guys." "No!" Brock shouted into the radio. "Frank, they're not real firefighters, they're—" One of the figures reached out and touched the radio. It burst into static, then died completely. "That was unnecessarily dramatic," Brock said, surprised by his own calmness. Maybe it was the oxygen, or maybe he'd just moved past fear into acceptance. "You're taking this better than most," the lead figure observed, removing its helmet. Underneath was a face that might have been human once, but was now something else. Features made of compressed ash and smoke, constantly shifting, never quite settling into a fixed form. "What are you?" Brock asked. "We're what fire leaves behind," it answered. "Every wildfire, every forest that burns, every life that ends in smoke and flame. We're the memory of that destruction. We exist in the smoke because smoke is what remains when everything else is gone. And you want me to? What? Become like you? Want has nothing to do with it. The smoke is inside you now. It's changing you at a cellular level. You can feel it, can't you? The way your lungs are hardening, turning to something that doesn't need air anymore. The way your blood is thickening, becoming more like sap than plasma. Brock could feel it. Despite the oxygen mask, each breath was harder than the last. Not from damage, but from transformation. His lungs were becoming something that could process smoke instead of air. "Why the trucks?" he asked. "Why make us drive into the fire?" "Movement," another figure said. "Fire needs movement to spread, to live. Every vehicle that enters the fire becomes part of it, extends its reach. The drivers become us, and we become the smoke that calls more drivers. It's been this way since humans first learned to use fire. We've always been here in every flame, waiting. But I crashed. I got away. Did you? The lead figure gestured to the window. Brock looked outside and felt his sanity crack a little more. His truck was out there, not crashed, not rolled, but sitting perfectly intact in front of the station. Engine running, trailer still attached, loaded with medical supplies that suddenly seemed like a cosmic joke. That's not possible. You never crashed, Brock. You pulled over when the smoke got too thick. You've been sitting in this station, breathing tank after tank of oxygen for the last hour. Everything else was your mind trying to make sense of what's happening to you. Brock looked down at the oxygen tank he was holding. It was empty, had been empty for who knows how long. He'd been breathing smoke, thinking it was oxygen. No, he said, but there was no force behind it. He stood up, walked to the window. His truck was definitely there, waiting for him. And beyond it, the road. And beyond that, the fire line, still calling, still waiting. It's easier if you accept it, the lead figure said, almost gently. The transformation hurts less. And afterward, you'll understand. You'll see the beauty in the burning, the necessity of the consumption. Fire cleanses, fire renews, fire transforms. Brock's hands were changing. He watched with detached fascination as his skin took on that gray, ashy quality he'd seen on the dead firefighter by the creek. Or had there been a creek? Had there been a crash? Was any of it real? The radio crackled back to life. Frank's voice, but different now. Older. Tired. Brock, if you can hear this, I'm sorry. I tried to warn you, but the smoke, it doesn't let us say what we really mean. I've been at this truck stop for 3 days, not 6 hours, maybe longer. Time doesn't work right anymore. None of us can leave. We just sit here, breathing smoke, pretending we're waiting for the road to clear. But the road never clears. The fire never stops. And eventually we all drive into it. Because that's what it wants. That's what it's always wanted. Brock stood at the window of the fire station, watching his truck idle in the orange-tinted darkness outside. His hands were fully gray now, the color of cigarette ash. And when he flexed his fingers, small puffs of smoke rose from the joints. It didn't hurt. That was the strangest part. It should have hurt. But instead, there was only a cool numbness spreading up his arms. 3 days, he said to the figures behind him. Frank's been trapped for 3 days. Time is smoke, the lead figure replied. It billows and swirls and never moves in straight lines. You've been here 2 hours or 2 days or 2 years. It doesn't matter. What matters is what you choose now. What choice? You said I'm already changing. You are. But there are different ways to change. You can resist until your body gives out, and you'll become like our friend by the creek, a monument to denial, forever frozen in the moment of refusing to accept reality. Or you can embrace it and become something more purposeful. Brock turned from the window. Purposeful? The figure removed its firefighter jacket, revealing a body that was more smoke than solid, constantly shifting between states. We serve the fire, yes, but we also serve a function. We're the warning system, the harbinger. Every person who sees us knows to flee. We save more lives than we take. That's bullshit rationalization, and you know it. Is it? How many people saw you driving into the smoke and turned around? How many heard your mayday call and decided to wait out the fire instead of trying to push through? Even now, your abandoned truck is sending a message to other drivers. Don't come this way. The radio crackled again. This time it was Dale from Sacramento. The real Dale, not the dead firefighter. Brock, if you're out there, we've been trying to reach you.
The delivery was canceled. Repeat, the delivery was canceled. There's no need to push through to Eureka. Turn back if you can. Too late for that, Brock thought. Way too late. He picked up the radio handset, surprised to find he could still work the buttons despite his transformed hands. Dale, this is Brock. Tell my wife. Tell her I tried to make it back. Brock! Jesus, we thought we'd lost you. Where are you? I'm in the smoke, Dale. Don't send anyone after me. The road's not safe. The fire's not what we think it is. You're not making sense, buddy. Just tell us your location. Brock looked at the figures around him. They weren't moving to stop him, just watching with those oil-black eyes. I'm at a Forest Service station, but I don't think it's on any map. Not anymore. Dale, listen carefully. The smoke does something to people. Changes them. Don't let anyone drive through it. Close the roads. All of them. Already done, buddy. Caltrans shut down everything an hour ago. Nobody's going through that smoke until it clears. An hour ago. But Brock had been on the road for 2 hours. Another impossibility to add to the pile. One of the smoke figures spoke, its voice directed at the radio. Time moves differently in the smoke, Dale. Your friend entered before the closure. He's been driving through possibilities, through might-be's and could-be's. Every decision creates a new timeline, and in the smoke, they all exist simultaneously. Dale's voice came back, confused. Who was that? Brock? Who's with you? Firefighters, Brock said, and laughed at the absurdity of it. Sort of. He set down the radio and walked to the medical supply cabinet. Inside, among the bandages and medications, he found what he was looking for, a mirror. He held it up and immediately wished he hadn't. His face was changing like his hands had. The skin was taking on that ash-gray quality, and his eyes were darkening, the irises expanding until they were pools of black. But worse than the physical changes was what he saw behind his reflection. Multiple versions of himself, all at different stages of transformation. In one, he was already fully changed, made of smoke and ash. In another, he was dead, collapsed on the station floor. In a third, he was still driving, the fire line approaching, his hands fused to the steering wheel. All possibilities, the lead figure explained. The smoke shows you all the ways your story could end. Most people can't handle seeing their own deaths multiplied into infinity. It breaks them. But I'm not broken. No, you're surprisingly resilient. That's why we're taking our time with you. The strong ones, the ones who fight, they make the most effective servants once they turn. Their will, transformed into purpose, can call dozens of others into the smoke. Brock set down the mirror. So I'm special. Lucky me. Frank was special too, another figure said. He fought for 3 days. Now he's one of our best callers. Listen. The radio came alive with Frank's voice, but now Brock could hear the layers beneath it. Multiple Franks, all speaking at once, creating harmonics that pulled at something deep in his brain. Attention all westbound drivers. This is Frank at the Weaverville stop. Roads starting to clear up. Visibility improving. If you need to get through, now's your window. It was a lie, of course, but delivered with such conviction, such layers of subliminal persuasion, that Brock knew drivers would believe it. They'd start their engines, pull onto 299, and drive straight into the smoke. Turn it off, Brock said. You could do that too, the lead figure said. Your voice, transformed, would be even more compelling. 22 years of trust built up in the trucking community. They'd believe anything you told them. I won't. Not now. But when the transformation completes, you won't have a choice. The fire thinks through us, speaks through us. We're its neurons, its voice box, its hands. Individual will becomes collective purpose. Brock felt his knees buckle. He caught himself on the desk, but his legs were starting to go numb like his arms had. The transformation was accelerating. Outside, his truck's horn sounded 3 times. A signal he'd used countless times over the years, ready to roll. "It's calling you," the lead figure said. "Your truck knows its purpose even if you don't. Every vehicle wants to complete its journey, and yours leads through the fire. Machines don't want things, don't they? Why do engines fail at the worst possible moment? Why do tires blow out on dangerous curves? Machines have their own desires, and in the smoke, those desires become manifest." Brock could feel it now, the pull from his truck. 22 years of partnership, of shared miles, of absolute trust between driver and machine. The Kenworth wanted to complete this last delivery, wanted to drive into the fire with him at the wheel. He stood up, his legs barely supporting him. Each step toward the door was both his choice and not his choice. The smoke inside him was making decisions his conscious mind opposed but couldn't override. The door opened without him touching it. Outside, the smoke had thickened to the point where even his transformed eyes could barely penetrate it. But he could see his truck, clear as day, like it existed in a bubble of clarity just for him. The driver's door was open. The engine was running smooth, all traces of earlier mechanical issues gone. The trailer was still attached, still loaded with medical supplies that would never reach Eureka. Had never been meant to reach Eureka. "The hospitals don't need supplies," the lead figure said, now standing beside him. That was just the story to get trucks on the road. The fire needs offerings, needs metal and diesel and human will to feed its growth. Every wildfire is hungrier than the last, needs more to sustain itself. Climate change isn't just making fires bigger. It's making them more aware. Fires aren't conscious. Weren't. But consciousness is just pattern recognition at sufficient complexity. And what's more complex than a wildfire? Millions of chemical reactions, air currents, temperature differentials, all interacting in patterns that mirror neural activity. Add enough human consciousness to that mix, absorbed through the smoke, and you get something that thinks. Brock was at his truck now, one hand on the door frame. The metal was cool despite the heat everywhere else. Welcoming. Familiar. Inside the cab, everything was exactly as he'd left it. His coffee mug in the cup holder still half full. His logbook open on the passenger seat. The photo of his wife and kids clipped to the sun visor. That photo stopped him. Martha and the boys, taken last Christmas. Everyone smiling, wearing those ridiculous matching sweaters Martha insisted on every year. They were waiting for him in Reading, expecting him home in 3 days. "They'll never understand what happened to you," the lead figure said, reading his hesitation. "You'll be another missing trucker, another victim of the wildfires. They'll grieve, they'll move on, they'll forget. That's the human way." "No," Brock said, and for the first time in an hour, his voice had strength behind it. "They won't forget. Martha's stubborn like that. She'll keep looking, keep asking questions. She'll drive this same road looking for answers. Then she'll join you in the smoke." The thought of Martha driving into this nightmare broke something in Brock. Not his will, but his acceptance. He'd been passive, letting the transformation happen, assuming it was inevitable. But if there was even a chance, Martha would come looking for him. He grabbed his phone from the center console. His fingers were barely solid enough to work the screen, but he managed to pull up Martha's number. 1 bar of signal, flickering in and out. The phone rang once, twice, then, "Brock? Oh, thank God. Where are you?" "Martha, listen. Don't come looking for me. Whatever happens, whatever they tell you, don't drive Highway 299. "What? Brock, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His face was more smoke than flesh now. "I'm not coming home, baby.
The fire. The smoke. It's got me.
Don't talk like that. Where are you? I'll come get you.
No!
The word came out with such force that smoke billowed from his mouth. Promise me, Martha. Promise you'll never drive through wildfire smoke. Never. No matter what. Brock, please. The phone dissolved in his hand, becoming smoke that drifted out the window. His last connection to his old life. Gone. The lead figure climbed into the passenger seat, its form solidifying into something almost human. That was cruel, telling her not to come. Now she'll always wonder. Better than the alternative. Is it? At least here, in the smoke, you'd be together. Transformed, yes, but together. Forever. Brock's hands found the steering wheel, the familiar grip, worn smooth by years of contact. The truck seemed to purr in response, ready to go, eager to complete its journey. Every mile demands payment, Brock said, remembering something an old trucker had told him years ago. I've driven millions of miles. This is just the bill coming due. Poetic, but not quite accurate. This isn't payment, it's promotion. From driver to force of nature, from human to elemental. You'll exist as long as fire exists, which is to say, forever. Brock put the truck in gear. The weight of the loaded trailer felt perfect, balanced, one last perfect run. But instead of heading toward the fire line, he turned the wheel hard left. The Kenworth's engine roared as Brock drove off the road and into the forest. The figures in firefighter gear materialized outside, trying to block his path, but the truck plowed through them like they were made of fog. Which, Brock realized, they essentially were. "What are you doing?" the lead figure demanded from the passenger seat, its form becoming less stable as they moved away from the road. "Something you didn't expect," Brock said, downshifting as the truck climbed a steep grade between the trees. "You said every vehicle wants to complete its journey. Well, I'm completing mine, just not the way you planned." The forest was dense, old growth that had somehow survived previous fires. The truck shouldn't have been able to navigate between the massive trunks, but the smoke seemed to part reality just enough to let them through. Or maybe Brock was becoming smoke enough himself that physical obstacles meant less. His phone, reformed from smoke, rang again. But it wasn't Martha this time. It was his own voice. "You can't escape, Brock. You're part of the fire now. Part of us. Maybe. But I'm still part me too. And the me part has a different idea." He'd remembered something from his Navy days, from fighting shipboard fires. Fire needs 3 things: heat, fuel, and oxygen. Remove any one, and the fire dies. The smoke figures, these transformed souls, they were fuel. Every person who joined them made the fire stronger, more aware. But what if that fuel was removed? What if instead of driving into the fire, he drove away from it, taking his transforming essence with him? The lead figure laughed, reading his thoughts. "You think you can starve the fire by denying it one soul? Hundreds have already joined. Thousands will join before this season ends." "Not talking about one soul," Brock said, wrestling the wheel as the truck bounced over rough terrain. "I'm talking about all of you. You're connected to me now, aren't you? I can feel it. Every smoke figure, every transformed driver, all linked through the smoke. You infected me, but infection works both ways." The figure's form solidified in alarm. "You don't know what you're doing." "Sure I do. I'm a trucker. I deliver things. And right now I'm delivering all of you away from the fire." He could feel them now, all the transformed souls. Frank at the truck stop, the fake firefighters, dozens of others scattered through the smoke. They were all connected through him, through his ongoing transformation. He was becoming a conduit, a pipeline through which their essence flowed. The truck burst out of the forest onto a ridgeline. Below, Brock could see a lake, Shasta Lake, if his geography was right. Miles of water, the antithesis of fire. "You'll die," the figure said. "Water will destroy what you're becoming." "That's the idea. You'll take us all with you. Hundreds of souls extinguished." "Freed," Brock corrected. "Not extinguished. Freed." He could hear them all now, voices in the smoke, in his head, in his transforming cells. Some begged him to stop, others thanked him, most just screamed. The truck crested the ridge and started down the other side, picking up speed. Brock could see the lake getting closer, its surface reflecting the orange sky like a mirror full of fire. His hands were fused to the steering wheel now, flesh and plastic becoming one. His feet were melded to the pedals. He and the truck were becoming a single entity, just as the smoke figures had promised. But that fusion worked both ways. If he was becoming the truck, then the truck was becoming him. And he was still human enough to choose. The speedometer hit 60, 70, 80, too fast for the grade, too fast for the curves. But Brock wasn't planning to make the curves. The lead figure made one last attempt, its form reaching across the cab to grab at the wheel. "The fire needs us. Without consciousness, it's just destruction. With us, it could be something more, something purposeful." "Fire doesn't need purpose," Brock gasped, his voice barely human anymore. "It just needs to burn, and eventually burn out." The lake was coming up fast, maybe 100 yards. The truck was doing 90 now, engine screaming, trailer fishtailing behind. 50 yards. The figure gave up trying to stop him, instead becoming almost human in its final moment. "Why?" it asked. And for the first time, Brock heard genuine emotion in its voice. Fear, sadness, confusion. "Because I'm a trucker," Brock said. "And truckers look out for each other." The truck hit the water at 93 miles per hour. The impact was like hitting a concrete wall. The cab crumpled, the trailer jackknifed and tore free. But Brock barely felt it. He was already dissolving, his smoke-transformed body meeting water in an explosion of steam and vapor. But as he dissolved, so did his connection to the others. He could feel them being pulled from the fire, their essence flowing through him and into the water. Frank, the firefighters, dozens of others, all being extinguished and freed simultaneously. The fire screamed. Miles away, the wildfire faltered. Without the conscious souls feeding it, directing it, it became just fire again. Still dangerous, still destructive, but no longer actively malevolent. CAL FIRE would later report that the mountain fire unexpectedly laid down at 3:47 p.m., allowing them to achieve 40% containment by nightfall. In the lake, Brock's consciousness fragmented into a million droplets of steam. But in those final moments, he felt the others passing through him, and they weren't smoke anymore. They were themselves again, human souls freed from the fire's grasp. "Thank you," Frank whispered as he passed. "Tell Martha," Brock tried to say, but he had no voice left, no form to speak with. Yet somehow Frank heard him. "I will. I'll tell her everything." Then there was nothing but water and steam and the gradual cooling of superheated metal sinking into the lake's depths. December 28th, 2023. 4:47 a.m. The dashboard thermometer in Rex Callahan's 2010 Freightliner Cascadia read minus 12 degrees Fahrenheit as he approached the Donner Pass summit on Interstate 80. The Weather Service had predicted moderate snowfall, maybe 6 inches overnight. They'd been wrong. Dead wrong. What Rex was driving through now was a full-scale blizzard, the kind that killed truckers every winter in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Rex was 51 years old, built like a defensive lineman gone slightly soft around the middle. His hands, massive and scarred from 19 years of wrestling with frozen chains and stubborn fifth wheels, gripped the steering wheel with practiced calm.
But underneath that calm, a familiar tension was building. The Donner Pass had claimed more truckers than any other route in California. Named after the infamous Donner Party who'd resorted to cannibalism when trapped by snow in 1846. The pass seemed to carry that dark history in every snowflake, every ice-covered curve. The load was critical. 43,000 pounds of automotive parts from a distribution center in Reno to assembly plants in Oakland. Just-in-time manufacturing meant these parts needed to arrive by noon, or production lines worth millions would shut down. Rex had made this run hundreds of times over the years, but never in conditions quite like this. He'd picked up the load at 2 a.m. from Clay Morrison, the night supervisor at the Reno warehouse. Clay was an old-timer like Rex, had been working the docks for 23 years. He'd helped Rex secure the load, double-checking every strap and chain because they both knew what mountain weather could do to improperly secured cargo. "You sure about this, Rex?" Clay had asked, watching the snow fall in sheets through the loading dock lights. "Weather's getting worse by the hour. They're talking about closing the pass." "If they close it, I'll turn around," Rex had promised. "But these parts have to at least try to get through. You know how it is." Clay had nodded, understanding the pressure. In the trucking world, on-time delivery was everything. Your reputation, your livelihood, your entire career could be destroyed by too many late loads, and Rex had never been late, not once in 19 years. "Just be careful," Clay had said, handing Rex a thermos of fresh coffee. "That pass has been hungry this winter, already taken 3 trucks since December." Rex knew about those 3 trucks. Every trucker who worked the California mountains knew. One had jackknifed and gone over the edge, driver never found. Another had burned to the ground after a brake fire, the driver barely escaping. The third had simply vanished. Truck found abandoned in a chain-up area, engine running, driver's door open, but no trace of the driver. As Rex climbed toward the summit, the snow was falling so thick he could barely see his own hood ornament. The windshield wipers, on their highest setting, could barely keep up. Ice was building on the edges of the windshield, creeping inward like frozen fingers trying to blind him completely. The truck's engine was laboring in the thin air, and Rex could feel the weight of the trailer pushing from behind. 43,000 pounds of momentum that wanted to keep going no matter what. On flat ground, that weight was manageable. On a 6% grade covered in ice and snow, it was a potential death sentence. His CB radio crackled with static, then cleared for a moment. A voice he recognized came through. Buck Williams, another veteran driver who'd been working these mountains for over 20 years. "Any westbound trucks near Donner Summit. This is Buck in the blue Peterbilt. Road conditions are deteriorating fast. CHP is about to close the pass. If you're not already committed to the descent, find a place to park." Rex grabbed his handset. "Buck, this is Rex Callahan in the Burgundy Freightliner. I'm about a mile from the summit. What's the westbound side look like?" "Rex? Jesus, didn't know you were out here. The westbound side is bad. Real bad. Black ice under the snow and visibility is maybe 50 feet. I'm parked at the brake check area, and I'm not moving until this clears." The brake check area. That was at the summit. Mandatory stop for all commercial vehicles before beginning the 7-mile descent into Truckee. 7 miles of 6% grade that turned into a death trap in conditions like these. "Copy that, Buck. I'll pull in and assess." But as Rex crested the summit, he realized pulling into the brake check area was going to be harder than expected. The entrance was somewhere in the wall of white to his right, invisible in the blizzard. He slowed to a crawl, searching for the reflective markers that should guide him in. That's when he felt it. The first sign that something was wrong. He pressed the brake pedal to slow further, and instead of the firm resistance of properly functioning air brakes, the pedal felt soft, spongy. Rex's blood turned to ice water. He pumped the pedal, standard procedure to build air pressure, but the feeling didn't improve. He glanced at his air pressure gauges. Primary system, 115 psi. Secondary, 118 psi. Both within normal range. So why did the brakes feel wrong? Rex found the brake check entrance more by memory than sight, pulling into the covered area where trucks could inspect their brakes before the descent. He set the parking brake, noting that it too felt softer than usual, and climbed out into the storm. The cold hit him like a physical blow. The wind was howling through the mountains, driving snow horizontally. Rex had to hold on to his truck to keep from being knocked over. He grabbed his flashlight and crawled under the trailer to inspect the brake chambers. What he found made his stomach drop. Ice. Thick ice coating the brake chambers, the air lines, the slack adjusters. The extreme cold had caused moisture in the air system to freeze, partially blocking the lines. The brakes were working, but at maybe 60% capacity. On a 6% downgrade with 43,000 pounds pushing from behind, 60% braking power was a recipe for disaster. Rex crawled back out and stood in the howling wind, considering his options. He could wait for the ice to thaw, but in these temperatures that could take hours or even days. He could call for a service truck, but in this weather, help might not come at all. Or he could try to make it down, using engine braking and careful speed management to compensate for the reduced brakes. He climbed back into his cab, where Buck's voice was coming through the CB. "Rex, you still there? CHP just rolled through. They're closing the road in 30 minutes. Anyone not already descending has to park and wait it out." 30 minutes. If Rex waited, he could be stuck here for days. The parts would be late, the assembly lines would shut down, and his perfect record would be broken. More than that, his company might lose the contract. And in this economy, that could mean layoffs. Good people Rex knew and worked with, could lose their jobs because he was too scared to drive down a mountain he'd descended hundreds of times. "Buck, my brakes are iced up. Maybe 60% capacity." There was a long pause. Then Buck's voice, serious and concerned. "Rex, don't do it. That grade will eat you alive with reduced brakes." Rex stared through his windshield at the white void beyond. Somewhere in that void was the road down, 7 miles of curves and steep grade. He'd driven it so many times he could probably do it with his eyes closed, but never with failing brakes, never in a complete whiteout. He thought about his wife, Carol, probably just waking up in their house in Modesto. She'd be making coffee, checking the weather, worrying about him like she always did when he drove in storms. His son, also named Clay, ironically enough, home from college for winter break. They were expecting him home tomorrow for a delayed Christmas celebration. But he also thought about Clay Morrison back in Reno, counting on him to get this load through. About the assembly line workers in Oakland who needed these parts. About 19 years of never letting anyone down. Rex made his decision. "Buck, I'm going for it. I know this road. I can manage with engine braking and careful speed control." "Rex, no! This is suicide in these conditions." But Rex was already releasing his parking brake, feeling it grab weakly before letting go. He put the truck in gear and began creeping toward the exit of the brake check area. "If something happens," Rex said into the radio, "tell Carol I love her." "God damn it, Rex, don't be a hero." But Rex was already gone, rolling out into the blizzard, beginning the descent. The first 100 yards were deceptively gentle, the grade not too steep yet. Rex kept his speed at 15 km/h, using primarily engine braking. The Jake brake roared as it held back the weight of the truck, but Rex knew it couldn't do the job alone. Jake brakes lost effectiveness at low RPMs, and on ice, using them too aggressively could cause a loss of traction. The first curve came up faster than expected, visibility so bad that Rex only saw the guardrail when he was almost on top of it. He touched the brake pedal gently, felt it respond slowly, mushily. The truck's speed barely changed. He downshifted, the transmission protesting, and managed to make the curve, but his trailer tires brushed the guardrail with a scraping sound that sent shivers down his spine. Mile marker 161. The grade steepened to the full 6%, and Rex felt the weight of the trailer really start to push. His speed crept up despite the engine braking. 20 miles per hour, 25, 30. Too fast for these conditions. He touched the brakes again, harder this time. The truck slowed slightly, maybe down to 25, but Rex could smell hot metal. The partial brakes were overheating from the constant use. The wind suddenly gusted, shoving the truck sideways. Rex corrected, but overcorrected, and felt the trailer start to swing. The beginning of a jackknife. He steered into it, letting off all braking to regain control. The truck straightened but picked up speed. 35 miles now. The radio crackled. "Rex, this is Clay. Clay Morrison from Reno. Buck called me, told me what you're doing. Pull over, man. The load isn't worth your life." Clay had driven all the way from the warehouse to try to talk him down, but it was too late for that now. There was nowhere to pull over safely, no way to stop without the brakes. Rex was committed. "Can't stop now, Clay. Brakes are getting worse. I need to keep moving or I'll lose all control." Mile marker 162. A sharp right curve that Rex remembered well. In good conditions, it was taken at 35 miles per maximum. Rex was doing 40 and climbing despite his best efforts. He cranked the wheel hard right, felt the truck lean dangerously. The trailer tried to keep going straight, its momentum fighting against the turn. Rex heard cargo shifting in the trailer, 43,000 pounds of auto parts becoming projectiles. Something heavy slammed against the trailer's front wall. The truck made the curve, barely, the driver's side tires lifting slightly before slamming back down. Rex's coffee thermos fell from the cup holder, spilling hot liquid across his lap. He didn't even flinch. All his attention was focused on the road he couldn't see, navigating by memory and instinct. That's when the hallucinations started. At first, Rex thought it was just snow patterns in his headlights. But the shapes were too organized, too deliberate. Figures standing along the roadside, visible for just seconds as he passed. People in old-fashioned clothing, the kind gold miners might have worn in the 1800s, or the Donner Party in 1846. Stress, Rex told himself. Adrenaline and fear playing tricks. But the figures kept appearing, and some of them were moving, walking alongside his truck, keeping pace despite his speed. Mile marker 163. The grade briefly lessened to about 4%, giving Rex a moment of hope. He managed to slow to 30 miles per hour using just engine braking. But he could smell his own brakes now, the acrid stink of overheated brake pads. The 60% capacity he'd started with was probably down to 40% now. The CB came alive with Buck's voice. "Rex, I'm following you down. I can see your taillights. Jesus Christ, you're going too fast." Rex glanced in his mirrors but saw nothing through the snow. If Buck was back there, he was invisible in the white void. "Stay back, Buck. If I lose it, I don't want to take you with me." "Already committed, you stubborn bastard. We'll get through this together." Mile marker 164. The worst section, Rex knew. 3 sharp curves in quick succession, all at maximum grade. In summer, with good brakes, it was challenging. Now it was nearly impossible. The first curve came up, a hard left. Rex's speed was back up to 45 miles per hour, way too fast. He stood on the brake pedal with all his weight. The truck slowed grudgingly to maybe 35, but Rex heard a loud pop from underneath. One of the brake chambers had failed completely. The diaphragm probably ruptured from the combination of ice and overheating. The truck made the curve, but Rex knew he was in serious trouble now. Maybe 20% braking capacity remaining, and 3 more miles of descent ahead. The second curve, a right-hander, came immediately after. Rex couldn't slow down at all. The truck took the curve at 40 miles per hour, tilting dangerously. Rex heard the cargo shift again, violently this time. Something had broken loose back there. The third curve was the killer. Rex knew. A sharp left with a cliff on the right side. No guardrail, just a drop of 300 feet onto jagged rocks. His speed was approaching 50 mph. The brakes were essentially gone, pedal going to the floor with no response. The engine brake was screaming but couldn't hold the weight. The curve rushed up through the snow. Rex had a choice. Try to make the curve and likely go over the cliff, or deliberately crash into the rock wall on the left side of the road. He chose the rock wall. Cranking the wheel hard left earlier than the curve required, Rex aimed his truck at the granite face of the mountain. The right side of his truck scraped along the rock, throwing sparks visible even through the blizzard. The friction slowed him slightly, down to maybe 40 mph, and the impact kept pushing him back toward the road. Metal screamed and tore. The passenger mirror exploded. The passenger door crumpled inward. But the truck stayed on the road, made the curve, and continued its descent. Mile marker 165. 2 miles to go. Buck's voice on the radio. "Rex, you magnificent bastard. I can't believe you made that curve. But you're trailing parts. Your trailer's damaged." Rex could feel it. The trailer pulling wrong, probably a blown tire or damaged axle from the impact. But he was still moving, still descending, still alive. The hallucinations were getting worse. Full figures now, standing in the road ahead, forcing Rex to swerve around them. Except when he swerved, nothing was there. His mind was creating obstacles that didn't exist, while potentially missing real ones hidden in the snow. His speed was climbing again. 45, 50, 55 mph. The engine governor kicked in, preventing the engine from over-revving, which meant the engine brake became useless. Rex was now just along for the ride, gravity and 43,000 pounds of cargo in full control. That's when he saw it. A miracle, perhaps, or just good planning by Caltrans. A runaway truck ramp, one of those long uphill gravel beds designed to stop trucks that had lost their brakes. Rex had passed it hundreds of times, never imagining he'd need it. The entrance was coming up fast on the right. Rex yanked the wheel, felt the truck lean dangerously, then slam into the deep gravel. The deceleration was violent, throwing Rex forward against his seatbelt. The truck plowed up the ramp, gravel flying, speed dropping rapidly. 40 mph, 30, 20, 10. The truck came to a stop halfway up the ramp, engine still running, cab tilted at a steep angle. Rex sat there for a moment, hands shaking uncontrollably, adrenaline making his whole body vibrate. He was alive. He'd made it. Buck's truck appeared out of the snow, pulling over at the bottom of the ramp. Clay's rental car was right behind him. He'd driven all the way from Reno in a sedan in a blizzard. Both men ran up the ramp to Rex's cab. "You insane son of a bitch!" Buck shouted, but he was smiling through tears. "I thought I was about to watch you die." Clay climbed up to the driver's door. "Rex, you okay? Talk to me!" Rex tried to answer, but found he couldn't speak. The adrenaline was wearing off, and shock was setting in. He'd come so close to death, so close to becoming another casualty of Donner Pass. The aftermath was surreal. Rex sat in his tilted cab while emergency vehicles arrived, their lights turning the falling snow into a disco ball of red and blue. The California Highway Patrol, Cal Fire, paramedics, all struggling up the mountain in the blizzard to reach him. A young CHP officer was the first to reach his cab, looking impossibly young under his campaign hat. "Sir, are you injured?" Rex found his voice finally. "I'm okay. Brakes failed. Complete failure on the descent." The officer looked at the truck, buried to its axles in gravel, then back at Rex. "You came down from the summit with no brakes? In this weather?" "Didn't have much choice once they failed." The officer shook his head in disbelief. "I've been working this pass for 5 years. I've never seen anyone survive a complete brake failure in conditions like these." The paramedics insisted on checking Rex over, finding his blood pressure dangerously high and his hands cut from gripping the steering wheel so hard his fingernails had dug into his palms. They wanted to transport him to the hospital, but Rex refused. "I need to stay with my truck. The cargo is scrap metal now," Clay said, having inspected the trailer. "Whatever wasn't destroyed when you hit the mountain got pulverized when you hit this ramp. But who cares? You're alive." Buck was on his CB, telling every trucker on the mountain what had happened. Within minutes, Rex's survival was the talk of every truck stop from Reno to San Francisco. The man who'd descended Donner Pass with no brakes in a blizzard and lived. The tow truck that arrived was driven by an old-timer named Buck. Different Buck. Seemed like every third trucker was named Buck, Clay, or Rex in these parts. This Buck looked at Rex's truck and whistled. "Seen a lot of wrecks on this mountain, but this is something else. The whole passenger side is gone. How fast were you going when you hit the rock face?" "Maybe 50, Rex admitted. "Should have killed you. That granite doesn't forgive. You got lucky, friend, or someone was watching out for you." Rex thought about the hallucinations he'd seen, the figures in old-fashioned clothing. Trick of the mind, surely. But for just a moment, he wondered if the ghosts of Donner Pass had guided him, helped him survive where so many others had died. It took 6 hours to extract Rex's truck from the runaway ramp. During that time, the storm intensified, dumping another 18 inches of snow. The pass was closed completely, stranding hundreds of vehicles on both sides. Rex watched from Buck's truck, having finally agreed to leave his destroyed rig. "You know what the strangest thing is?" Buck said, handing Rex a cup of coffee from his thermos. "That runaway ramp shouldn't have been clear. With this much snow, it should have been buried, useless, but somehow it was perfectly clear when you needed it." Rex hadn't thought about that, but Buck was right. Everything else was buried under feet of snow, but the ramp had been accessible. Another coincidence? Or something more? Clay had to leave. His rental car couldn't handle the conditions, and he needed to get back before the roads became completely impassable. Before he left, he shook Rex's hand. "I shouldn't have let you take that load," he said. "When you didn't come back, I thought I'd killed you with my scheduling." "Not your fault," Rex assured him. "I made the choice to go down that mountain. Still, the company owes you more than they can ever pay. You risked everything to try to make that delivery." After Clay left, Buck drove Rex to a truck stop in Truckee to wait for Carol. She was driving up from Modesto, despite Rex's protests that the roads were too dangerous. "You nearly died," she'd said on the phone. "I'm coming to get you if I have to walk through that blizzard." While waiting, Rex sat in the truck stop's diner, nursing coffee and trying to stop his hands from shaking. Other truckers kept coming over, having heard about his descent on the CB. They wanted to hear the story firsthand, to understand how he'd survived. "Engine braking and friction against the mountain," Rex explained for the 10th time. "And a lot of luck." But one old-timer, a grizzled driver who'd been working Donner Pass since the 1970s, sat down across from Rex with a different question. "Did you see them?" "See who?" The old-timer leaned in, lowering his voice. "The others. The ones who didn't make it. They show themselves sometimes, in the storms. Some say they help, some say they hinder, but they're always there, watching the pass." Rex wanted to dismiss it as superstition, but he remembered those figures in the snow, the ones dressed like gold miners or pioneers. "I saw something. Probably just hallucinations from the stress." The old-timer nodded knowingly. "That's what we all say. But you made it down 7 miles of 6% grade with no brakes in a whiteout. That's not just skill or luck. That's intervention." Before Rex could respond, the old-timer stood and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of stranded travelers. Carol arrived 4 hours later, having fought through the storm in their Subaru. When she saw Rex, she broke down crying, holding him so tight his bruised ribs screamed in protest.
"Don't you ever do that again," she sobbed. "They called and said you'd crashed, and I thought...
"I'm okay," Rex assured her, though he wasn't sure that was true. Physically, maybe, but something had changed in him on that mountain. He'd touched something beyond normal experience, glimpsed something that shouldn't exist. The drive home took 2 days, the storm having shut down most of the direct routes. They had to go south through Nevada, then cut back west through Bakersfield. The whole time, Carol kept glancing at him, as if making sure he was really there. Their son Clay, Rex still found it funny that both Clays in this story weren't related, was waiting at home, having seen the news coverage. Rex's survival had made the local news, complete with helicopter footage of his truck buried in the runaway ramp. "Dad, you're famous," Clay Jr. said, showing Rex his phone. "You're trending on Twitter. Hero trucker saves Christmas deliveries." Rex looked at the coverage and laughed bitterly. The cargo had been destroyed, the truck was totaled, and he'd nearly died. Some hero. But the company didn't see it that way. Rex's dispatcher called the next day. "Rex, corporate wants to thank you personally. You went above and beyond trying to make that delivery. They're calling you a hero." "I failed. The cargo was destroyed. You attempted something no one else would have, and you survived something that should have killed you. That's worth more than any cargo." The insurance investigation took 3 weeks. The investigators found that moisture had entered the air brake system through a defective valve, freezing in the extreme cold and blocking the lines. It was a 1 in a million failure, they said. No one could have predicted or prevented it. But Rex knew the truth was more complex. He'd felt something wrong with the brakes at the summit. He could have stayed parked, could have waited for help. He'd chosen to descend anyway, driven by pride and duty and 19 years of never missing a delivery. The company offered him a new truck, a brand new Freightliner with all the latest safety features. But Rex found he couldn't do it. Every time he sat in a truck cab, he was back on that mountain, speed climbing, brakes gone, death approaching at 55 miles per hour. The dream started a week after the accident. Rex would be driving down Donner Pass again, but this time the figures in the snow were clearer. He could see their faces, men, women, children, all dressed in 1840s clothing. The Donner Party, or others who'd died on the mountain over the decades. In the dreams, they spoke to him. "You survived where we didn't," a woman in a bonnet said. "The mountain tested you and found you worthy." "Worthy of what?" Dream Rex asked. "To carry our warning, to save others from our fate." Rex would wake in a cold sweat, Carol holding him, whispering that it was just a dream. But the dreams felt more real than reality sometimes. 3 weeks after the accident, Rex got a call from Buck Williams. "Rex, I'm heading over Donner tomorrow with a load. Weather Service says possible snow. My brakes have been feeling soft lately. Should I be worried?" Rex felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. The exact same scenario. Soft brakes, incoming weather, Donner Pass. "Get them checked before you climb, Buck. Don't risk it." "It's probably nothing. Just a bit spongy. Buck, promise me. Get them checked." Buck must have heard something in Rex's voice because he agreed. The next day, he called back. "Rex, you're not going to believe this. The mechanic found moisture in my airlines. Said if I'd climbed in cold weather, it would have frozen and blocked the system. Would have lost my brakes on the descent." Rex hung up the phone, shaking. Coincidence? Or was he somehow connected to the mountain now, able to sense when it was about to claim another victim? 6 months passed. Rex had taken a desk job with the company, working as a safety coordinator, reviewing routes and weather conditions for other drivers. It paid less than driving, but Carol was just happy he was home every night. The nightmares had faded to maybe once a week, though Rex still woke sometimes thinking he could hear air brakes failing in the distance. It was late June when things started getting strange again. Rex was reviewing driver logs when he came across an incident report from Donner Pass. A driver named Clay Hutchinson, another Clay, because apparently the universe had a sense of humor, had reported seeing unusual figures during a night drive over the pass. His dash cam footage showed nothing, but Clay swore he'd seen people in old-fashioned clothing standing along the roadside. Rex called Clay directly. "Mr. Hutchinson, this is Rex Callahan from Safety. I wanted to follow up on your incident report." "Oh, the ghost thing?" Clay laughed nervously. "Yeah, I know how it sounds. Probably just tired, you know. Long shift, trick of the headlights." "Can you describe what you saw?" "Why? Company gonna put me on psych leave?" "No, nothing like that. I'm just interested." Clay was quiet for a moment. "You're the guy who came down with no brakes, aren't you? In the blizzard last winter?" "That's me. Did you see them too?" Rex closed his eyes. "Yeah, I saw them. Thank God. I thought I was going crazy. They were just standing there, watching. Men in old coats, women in long dresses, like something out of a history book." "Did they do anything? Say anything?" "No, just watched. But here's the weird thing. Right after I saw them, my temperature gauge started climbing. I pulled over, found my radiator was about to blow. If I hadn't stopped when I did, I would have broken down on the descent. Maybe gone over the edge in the dark." Rex felt that familiar chill. "The figures appeared right before you noticed the problem?" "Yeah, like they were warning me or something. Crazy, right?" "Not crazy at all. Thanks for the report, Clay." After hanging up, Rex pulled up incident reports for Donner Pass going back 5 years. He'd never thought to look for patterns before, but now, knowing what to look for, he found them. 17 reports of unusual figures or people in period clothing on the pass. In 12 of those cases, the drivers had discovered mechanical problems immediately after the sightings. Problems that, if undetected, could have caused fatal accidents. The other 5 drivers who'd seen the figures but ignored them? 3 were dead. 2 were permanently disabled from their crashes. Rex printed out all the reports and spread them on his desk. The sightings clustered around certain dates, late December, obviously, around the anniversary of the Donner Party tragedy, but also early October, late March, mid-June. Rex looked up historical records and found those dates corresponded with other major accidents on the pass over the years. Train derailments in the 1800s, a bus crash in the 1950s, multi-car pileups in the modern era. The mountain remembered its dead, and the dead watched over the living. That night, Rex told Carol what he'd discovered. "You think the mountain is haunted?" she asked, trying not to sound skeptical. "I think something watches over that pass. Call it ghosts, call it energy, call it whatever makes you comfortable. But it's real, and it's saved lives." "Including yours?" Rex thought about that runaway truck ramp, mysteriously clear of snow when everything else was buried. "Maybe, probably." Carol was quiet for a while, then said, "You want to go back, don't you? To the mountain?" Rex was surprised she'd sensed it, but she was right. Something was calling him back to Donner Pass, not to drive it, but to understand it. "Would you come with me?" he asked. "To visit the place that nearly killed you?" "Sure. Sounds like a fun weekend trip." But she was smiling, and that weekend they drove up to Donner Pass in their Subaru. Rex wanted to see it in summer, in daylight, without snow and terror clouding his perception. The pass was beautiful in June, all pine forests and granite peaks. They stopped at the brake check area where Rex had made his fatal decision to descend. It looked so innocuous in good weather, just a wide spot with some covered areas for brake inspection. Rex stood where he'd stood 6 months ago, remembering the weight of that decision. 43,000 pounds of cargo, failing brakes, a blizzard, and pride. Such a thin line between heroism and stupidity. "Rex?" Carol's voice was concerned. "You okay?" He turned to answer and froze. Standing next to Carol was a woman in a long dress and bonnet, clearly from the 1840s. She was transparent, like looking through foggy glass, but definitely there. Carol showed no sign of seeing her. The woman smiled at Rex and nodded toward the descent route. Then she walked to the edge of the brake check area and pointed down the mountain. Rex followed, Carol trailing behind, confused. At the edge, looking down the 7-mile grade, Rex saw them. Dozens of figures, all in period clothing from various eras, stationed along the road, watching, waiting. Guardian spirits of drivers, travelers, and pioneers who died on this mountain over nearly 2 centuries. "What do you see?" Carol asked, noting his expression. "Protection," Rex said. "I see protection." The woman in the bonnet turned to Rex and spoke, though her voice sounded like wind through pines. "You survived because you were meant to survive, to carry the message, to save others." "What message?" "That the mountain takes its toll, but it also protects those who respect it. You fought the mountain and lost, but you fought with honor. Now you serve as a bridge between worlds." "I don't understand." "You will. When the time comes, you will." The woman faded, and Rex found himself standing at the edge with Carol, looking at an empty road. "Rex, you're scaring me a little," Carol said. He took her hand. "I'm okay. Better than okay. I think I understand something now." They drove down the pass slowly, Rex pointing out each spot where something had happened during his brakeless descent. The curve where he'd scraped the mountain, still scarred with gouges in the granite. The runaway ramp, now clearly visible and accessible. The spot where he'd hallucinated the strongest, seeing dozens of figures. At the bottom, in Truckee, they stopped at the truck stop where Rex had waited for Carol after the accident. The same old-timer who'd asked about the figures was there, sitting in the same booth. He looked up as Rex entered and smiled. "You came back. They always do, the ones who've seen them." Rex sat down across from him, Carol beside him. "Who are you?" "Name's Buck Thompson. Different Buck than your friend. I drove this pass for 40 years before I retired. Or semi-retired. I still come here, still watch, still listen." "For what?" "For drivers like you. Ones who've crossed over and come back. You've got the sight now, don't you? You can see them." Rex nodded. "Just saw a woman at the brake check. 1840s clothing." "That'd be Mary. Don't know her last name, but she's been there since before my time. She's the one who keeps the runaway ramps clear in storms." "That was her?" Buck Thompson smiled. "The dead do what they can. Move a little snow here, cause a mechanical warning light there. Small things that save lives. But sometimes they need living help. That's where people like us come in." "People like us?" "Those who've touched death on the mountain and survived. We're changed by it. We can see them, hear them sometimes. And more importantly, we can act on their warnings in ways they can't." Buck Thompson pulled out a notebook, weathered and worn. "I keep track. Every sighting, every warning, every life saved. Been doing it for 20 years, since my own brush with death up there." He showed Rex the notebook. Hundreds of entries, dates and names and incidents. A secret history of Donner Pass that no official record would ever show. "Why?" Rex asked. "Because the mountain demands it. It takes its toll in blood, but it also creates guardians, living and dead, working together to prevent tragedies. You're part of that now, whether you want to be or not." Rex looked at Carol,
who was trying to follow a conversation where she was only hearing half the story. "Can she see them?" Rex asked Buck Thompson. "No, only those who've paid the toll can see. She's innocent of the mountain's hunger." That night, in their hotel in Truckee, Rex told Carol everything. About Mary, about Buck Thompson's notebook, about the community of guardians watching over the pass. "So you're saying you're part of some supernatural highway patrol now?" Carol asked, trying to process it all. "I guess so. I know how it sounds." "It sounds insane. But you did survive something that should have killed you. And that other Clay did find his radiator problem right after seeing the figures. Maybe there's something to it. You believe me?" "I believe you believe it. And strange things happen on mountains. Always have." Rex returned to work with a new understanding of his role. He wasn't just a safety coordinator reviewing routes and weather. He was a conduit between the living and the dead, receiving warnings he couldn't fully explain, but had to act on. It started small. Rex would get a feeling about a particular driver or route, a cold certainty that something was wrong. He'd call the driver, suggest an inspection or a route change. They usually listened. Rex's survival story had given him credibility in the trucking community. In the first month after his visit to Donner Pass, Rex's warnings prevented 3 accidents. A driver found a cracked brake drum that would have failed on Interstate 5's Grapevine descent. Another discovered his load had shifted dangerously after Rex insisted he check. A third avoided a pileup by taking Rex's advice to delay his trip by an hour. Buck Williams, his friend who'd followed him down during the brake failure, noticed the pattern. "Rex, how do you know this stuff? It's like you've got a crystal ball or something." "Just experience," Rex said, the lie feeling heavy. "You develop instincts after 19 years. But Buck wasn't buying it. "This isn't instinct. You called me last week and told me to check my 5th wheel pin. Thing was about to shear off. You couldn't have known that." Rex wanted to tell him the truth. That Mary, the ghost in the bonnet, had appeared in his office and pointed at Buck's name on the driver roster. But how could he explain that without sounding insane? 3 months after his return to Donner Pass, Rex got a call that changed everything. It was 2 a.m., his phone ringing urgently. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Rex Callahan?" "Yes." "This is Clay Morrison from Reno." Rex sat up. The same Clay who'd loaded his truck that fateful night. "Clay? What's wrong?" "I'm on Donner Pass, eastbound, climbing to the summit. My brakes, they're acting exactly like you described. Soft, spongy. And Rex, I can see them." "See who?" "The people in old clothes. They're everywhere, Rex. Standing in the snow, watching me. What's happening?" Rex was fully awake now. "Clay, where exactly are you?" "Mile marker 158, about 2 miles from the summit." "Stop, right now. Don't go over the summit." "There's nowhere to stop safely, shoulders buried in snow." It was December again, almost exactly a year since Rex's incident. The mountain was hungry for its annual toll. "Clay, listen to me. There's a chain-up area at mile marker 159. You can make it there. Pull over and wait." "Rex, the figures, they're moving now, walking alongside my truck. Jesus Christ, their faces." Rex could hear the panic in Clay's voice. He remembered his own terror seeing those figures for the first time. "They won't hurt you, Clay. They're trying to warn you. Your brakes are going to fail completely if you go over the summit. The mountain is trying to save you." "The mountain? Rex, what are you talking about?" "Trust me. Pull over at the chain-up area. I'm calling Buck Williams. He's in Reno tonight. He'll come help you." Rex hung up and immediately called Buck, who answered on the 3rd ring, groggy but alert. "Buck, Clay Morrison is on Donner Pass with failing brakes. He's at mile 158, going to stop at 159. Can you help him?" "Jesus, not again." "Yeah, I'm 20 minutes away. I'll go." Rex then did something he'd never done before. He closed his eyes and tried to call to Mary, the ghost in the bonnet. He pictured her, standing at the brake check area, watching over the pass. When he opened his eyes, she was standing in his bedroom. Carol, asleep beside him, didn't stir. "Clay Morrison is on your mountain," Rex said. "His brakes are failing." Mary nodded. "We know. We're trying to guide him to safety, but he's frightened. The living often are when they first see us. Can you keep the chain-up area clear? Give him a place to stop?" "Already done. But Rex, the mountain demands a toll tonight. It's the anniversary." "Anniversary of what?" "December 28th, 1846. The night the first of the Donner Party died. The mountain remembers. It always takes someone on this night." "Not Clay. Not tonight." Mary's expression was sad. "If not him, then another. The mountain must feed." "That's medieval thinking." "The mountain is older than medieval. Older than human memory. It has its own logic, its own needs. We can sometimes defer the toll, redirect it, but we cannot deny it entirely." Rex thought fast. "What if someone already paid? What if the toll was already collected?" "What do you mean?" "Me, last year. I should have died on that mountain. By all rights, I paid the toll. But I survived. Doesn't that create a credit?" Mary looked surprised as much as a ghost could look surprised. "You're offering your debt to save Clay?" "If that's possible, yes." Mary was quiet for a long moment, and Rex had the sense she was communicating with others, the community of spirits that watched over the pass. "It's possible," she finally said. "But there will be consequences. The mountain will mark you. You'll be bound to it forever, even after death. You'll become one of us, eventually." Rex thought about it for maybe 2 seconds. "Deal?" Mary nodded and faded away. Rex's phone rang immediately. It was Buck. "Rex, I found Clay. His brake system is completely frozen, just like yours was. But there's something weird. The chain-up area was completely clear of snow, like someone had just plowed it, in the middle of a blizzard. The mountain provides," Rex said, not caring how it sounded. "What?" "Nothing. Can you help Clay?" "Already on it. We're waiting for a tow truck. He's pretty shaken up. Keeps talking about seeing ghosts. Tell him he's not crazy. Tell him the mountain was warning him." Buck was quiet for a moment. "Rex, what really happened to you up there? You've been different ever since." "I learned that the mountain is alive, Buck. It takes lives, but it also saves them. And some of us get caught in between, serving as messengers." "That's crazy, I know. But Clay is alive because those ghosts warned him. Just like you're alive because I warned you about your brakes last spring." Buck didn't argue. How could he? The evidence was mounting. Clay called Rex the next morning. "Buck told me what you said, about the mountain being alive. You think I'm crazy? I think I saw people who've been dead for over a century. I think they saved my life. So if you're crazy, so am I." "Welcome to the club," Rex said. Over the following months, Rex and Clay formed an informal network with Buck Williams, Buck Thompson, the old-timer from the truck stop, and a handful of other drivers who'd had encounters on the pass. They shared warnings, compared sightings, and quietly saved lives without making a fuss about it. The company noticed Rex's uncanny ability to predict problems and promoted him to regional safety director. The position came with a significant raise, but also more responsibility. Rex now oversaw safety for all mountain routes in California and Nevada. He used the position to implement new policies: mandatory brake inspections before all mountain passes, weather holds when conditions exceeded certain parameters, required rest periods before difficult descents. The policies saved lives, though only Rex knew how many of them came from ghostly warnings. A year passed. December 28th approached again, the anniversary of Rex's brake failure and the first Donner Party death.
Rex felt the mountain calling him, a pull he couldn't ignore. He drove up to Donner Pass alone, telling Carol he needed to check on new safety equipment being installed. But really, he needed to face the mountain, to understand what his bargain with Mary meant. He parked at the brake check area at sunset. The temperature was dropping, and snow was beginning to fall. Rex stood where he'd made the decision to descend 2 years ago, looking down at the 7 miles of grade that had nearly killed him. Mary appeared beside him, along with dozens of other spirits. Men in mining clothes from the gold rush, railroad workers from the 1860s, truckers from every decade since highways were built. All victims of the mountain, all now serving as its guardians. "You came," Mary said. "I had to. I can feel it pulling at me." "That's the mark. You're bound to the mountain now, Rex Callahan. In life, you serve as our voice to the living. In death, I become one of you. Yes, but not for many years, if you're careful. The mountain is patient." Rex looked at the assembled spirits. "Do you regret it, being bound here?" An old trucker, his spirit form still wearing a 1960s-era uniform, spoke up. "I've saved 200 lives since I died in '68. My truck went over the edge, but my warnings have kept others on the road. That's a fair trade." Others nodded agreement. They'd found purpose in death, protecting others from their fate. "The toll must be paid," Mary said, "but we can influence how and when. Your sacrifice, deferring your debt to save Clay, bought us flexibility. The mountain accepted it. So Clay's debt is paid?" "All debts are paid, eventually. But for now, yes. And your work with the living, creating safety policies, warning drivers, that pleases the mountain. Fewer die, but those who do join our ranks and strengthen our watch." Rex understood. It was a balance. The mountain was dangerous, would always be dangerous. But the dead and the living could work together to minimize the danger, to help people navigate safely through perilous passages. His phone rang. It was Carol. "Rex, are you okay? You sound like you're standing in wind." He was. The wind on the mountain was picking up, snow starting to fall harder. "I'm fine. Just finishing up. I'll head home soon." "Drive careful. Weather service says a storm is coming." "I will." After hanging up, Rex turned to Mary. "Will I always see you? The others?" "When you need to. When the mountain needs you to. You're the bridge between worlds now." Rex nodded and walked back to his car. As he drove down the pass, carefully, respectfully, he saw them all along the road. The guardians, his future companions. They watched him pass with something like approval. At the bottom, in Truckee, Rex stopped at the truck stop. Buck Thompson was in his usual booth. "You went up to commune with them," Buck Thompson said. It wasn't a question. "Had to. It's the anniversary." "I know. I go up every March 15th, anniversary of my wreck. We all have our dates, our connections to the mountain." Rex sat down. "How do you live with it, knowing what's waiting?" Buck Thompson smiled. "How does anyone live knowing death is waiting? We just have a clearer picture of what comes after. And honestly, there are worse fates than spending eternity helping travelers navigate dangerous roads. Eternal highway patrol. Something like that. The roads need watching, always have, always will. We're just part of that tradition now." Rex thought about it as he drove home. He was 42 years old. With luck, he had another 30 or 40 years before the mountain claimed him permanently. 30 or 40 years to save lives, to build safety systems, to serve as the bridge between the living and the dead. When he got home, Carol was waiting with hot coffee and questions. "What were you really doing up there?" "Making peace with the mountain." She studied his face. "And did you?" "Yeah, I understand my place now." "Which is?" "Guardian,
Protector, toll keeper for a road that demands payment in blood but accepts other currencies when properly negotiated. Carol was quiet for a while, then said, "That's a hell of a job description. Someone has to do it." "Why you?" "Because I survived when I shouldn't have. Because I can see what others can't. Because the mountain chose me." She took his hand. "Just promise me you'll be careful. I don't want to lose you to that mountain." "You won't. Not for a long time. I've got work to do first." That night, Rex dreamed of the pass. But it wasn't a nightmare this time. He was standing at the summit, surrounded by the spirits of the mountain. They were showing him things, dangerous curves that needed better signage, spots where runaway ramps should be built, drivers who would need warnings in the coming weeks. When he woke, he had a list in his head. Actions to take, lives to save, tolls to defer. The mountain had made him its toll keeper, but Rex intended to be the kind that found ways to let people pass without paying. Every life saved was a small victory against the mountain's hunger. And perhaps, when his time finally came, when age or illness or simple fate brought him to his final ride, he'd join the Guardians willingly. Stand watch over the pass, warning the living, protecting travelers, part of an eternal community dedicated to safe passage through dangerous places. Until then, he had work to do. Rex got up, made coffee, and opened his laptop to review the next day's routes and weather conditions. Somewhere, a driver was about to make a dangerous decision. Somewhere, brakes were beginning to fail. Somewhere, the mountain was preparing to collect its toll. But Rex Callahan, toll keeper of Donner Pass, guardian of the living and voice of the dead, would be watching. And when the moment came, he'd make the call, send the warning, defer the payment. The road goes on forever. The toll must be paid. But not today. Not on Rex's watch. Not today.